After the 71st birthday dinner my children threw for me, I smiled as I tidied up the cake and flowers, my heart full of gratitude. I thought maybe I was still lucky to be loved at this age. But when I went back to the living room to grab the shawl I'd forgotten, I heard my daughter-in-law's voice slice through me like a cold knife. "It's time to dump her in a nursing home. They know how to handle senile old people there. When she dies, we split the estate evenly." I froze behind the kitchen door, hands shaking, listening to a pen scratching on paper, tallying percentages beating in time with my racing heart. The others just nodded, calm as anything. There's a very good place in Lisbon for someone like Mom. The whole house, the place where I'd rocked my babies to sleep and cooked our first family meals, suddenly felt like a cold courtroom. My throat tightened, my breath strangled by the fading scent of birthday flowers. Quietly, I switched my smartwatch to record ending 2 years of playing the gentle, compliant mother. They had no idea that this warm birthday night would launch a counterattack that would end with them paying the price behind bars. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Sylvia Carver, 71, a widow living alone in a small wooden house on the outskirts of Portland, Maine. I taught English for more than 30 years and always believed family was the safest harbor in life. After my husband Richard passed, I poured all my love into our 2 children, Derek and Alana, and tried to treat my daughter-in-law and son-in-law like my own. I'm simple. I love my backyard garden, I bake apple pies, and I reread old novels at night. People see me as a gentle, fragile mother living quietly in old age. What they don't know is that behind that softness is a seasoned woman, clear-headed and steady enough to make those who betrayed her pay. I stood in the dark a few more minutes, listening to the slick words coming from the very people I had birthed, raised, and protected all my life. Derek, my eldest, sounded like a stranger. If Mom hesitates tomorrow, I'll have Dr. Nolan certify that she's no longer competent. Brittany let out a dry little laugh. Good, the sooner the better. I already booked tickets to Lisbon. We just need the signatures. I looked at my trembling hands. They once shook from holding Derek when he burned with fever, from mending the sweater Alana wore to her first Christmas program. Now they shook from fearing those same children. I slipped away from the kitchen doorway, walking lightly so the floor wouldn't creak. Even the old wooden walls seemed to be holding their breath. In my small bedroom, I turned on the lamp and took out my worn notebook. It used to hold recipes and retirement plans. That night it became a ledger of sins. I wrote down every word I'd heard, afraid that by morning I might not believe they'd actually said it. Send Mom to Lisbon. Split the estate evenly. Medical power of attorney is done. I wrote as if each stroke of ink were a lifeline pulling me back from the edge. When the clock struck 12, I took a small USB from the desk drawer, plugged it into my smartwatch, and downloaded the recording. Every laugh, every word, every greedy breath, they were all captured. Derek thought I'd forgotten the safe code, but I created it. Quietly, I opened the safe in my room and checked. My wedding ring box, the house deed, and a handwritten letter from my late husband, Richard Carver, who left me 8 years ago. He once wrote, "If one day this house no longer feels like home, stay calm. The truth is always the ally of the decent." I smiled faintly. "Richard, I think it's time I used that." Near midnight, I heard a soft noise downstairs. I crept to the stairs, hid behind the wall, and saw Derek opening the secondary safe in the study, the one where I kept a few keepsake pieces of jewelry. Brittany stood guard, lighting the way with her phone. "Take it all. She won't need it tomorrow," Brittany whispered. I clenched my fists until my knuckles went white. I wasn't a mother to them anymore, just an obstacle between them and money. The next morning I pretended to wake late, eyes puffy like an insomniac old woman. Derek knocked on my door, voice airy. "Mom, Dr. Nolan will drop by for a checkup. Just routine." Routine. The word sounded like a sentence. I nodded lightly, smiling, hiding the fury boiling in my chest. Once they left, I opened my old laptop. The password still worked. In my email, I wrote to my former attorney Renee Park with an innocent subject line, "Roof insurance check." In the body, I wrote one line, "I need to see you as soon as possible. Urgent. Don't call." I printed every bank statement, noted the credit card numbers and the extra card Derek once talked me into opening, then sealed it all in an envelope and hid it in the flour bin in the kitchen pantry. Derek and Brittany hate to cook safest place there is. That afternoon, when Alana stopped by, I heard her whisper to her brother on the porch, "Dr. Nolan signed already. All that's left is the tickets tomorrow." I stood by the window and watched their reflections in the glass. The late sun threw a pale gold over everything, but I felt cold as steel. That night, I checked the doorbell camera via the app. One by one, Derek, Brittany, Alana had entered my house with their own keys while I was away the week before. I saved all the clips to an external drive and laid it carefully next to Richard's letter. I spent the whole night building a timeline, my own reverse plan for my fate. Morning. They'll unveil the vacation gift. Noon. Fake checkup doctor. Nolan certifies incompetence. Afternoon. Flight to Lisbon. Tomorrow night. My house is no longer in my name. I taped that note behind our wedding photo where no one would look. At 2 a.m., I went to the living room. The birthday candles still smelled like burnt wax. Balloon scraps littered the floor. I looked around every corner, held a memory. Derek's first steps, Alana at the piano, Richard hanging our family photo, and now it was all about to be sold off like old junk. I opened the safe one last time. The wedding ring box was gone. Derek must have taken it. I wiped my prints from the surface with a damp cloth, then locked it. Inside were only Richard's letter and a few stock certificates. I took the letter, kissed the shaky handwriting, and hid it beneath a loose floorboard in my bedroom, a slit where I used to stash loose change years ago. Outside, wind hissed through the old oaks. I stood at the window, staring at the night sky. No tears left. Only a cold steadiness rising in me, the calm of someone who knows peace sometimes requires a fight. I went back to bed and pulled the blanket to my chest. My watch still blinked, the recording saved. I smiled. The smile of someone who knows the game has turned. Tomorrow they'll think they're sending their mother on a vacation, but really, it'll be the first day of their self-destruction, step by step. Every piece of evidence, every word from their own mouths will walk them to the defendant's table. I closed my eyes, breathed deep, letting the wind sink with my heartbeat. My 71st birthday didn't end with a wish, it ended with a vow. I, Sylvia Carver, will not let anyone bury me while I'm still breathing. The next morning I woke to soft sunlight through the floral curtains I'd sewn 10 years ago. Coffee drifted up from the kitchen, mingling with light laughter. From the outside, it could have passed for a warm family morning, dutiful children fussing over their aging mother. But I knew those laughs weren't for me. I walked downstairs slowly, keeping my face serene. Derek wore a crisp shirt, Brittany arranged flowers, and Alana sat on the sofa holding a glossy gold envelope. "Good morning, Mom," Alana chirped, her smile stretched too wide. "We have a special gift for you. We want you to have a real vacation." I glanced at the envelope. Residencia Santa Luzia. Lisbon was printed in bold across the front. I knew exactly what it was. "In Portugal?" I asked lightly. "Yes, Mom," Derek said, feigning excitement. "The climate is great for seniors. There's medical care and activities. All you have to do is sign." I looked at the brochure showing a white building with sunlit corridors. The tagline read, "Where old age finds peace." I almost laughed. Even the place they planned to lock me up knew how to lie sweetly. "You think I need to go?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. Derek stepped closer, resting a caring hand on my shoulder. "Mom, you left the gas on last night. If Brittany hadn't noticed, the whole house could have gone up." I looked him straight in the eye. "Did I forget, or did someone turn it on first?" He blinked and looked away. Brittany slid in, voice as sweet as artificial sugar. "Don't misunderstand. We just care about you. You're not young anymore. They'll take care of you 24/7 over there better than staying in this old house. This old house," those 4 words cut like a blade. "This house is the result of a lifetime of work. Every teacher's paycheck I ever saved. Its memory, love, the legacy of me and Richard. In their mouths, it was just an old house." I set the brochure down and looked at all 3. "You've gone to a lot of trouble, but I'm still clear-minded enough to decide where I go." No one answered. Brittany's eyes flicked to Derek, like signaling the next move. Right then, Alana pulled a clipped stack of papers from her bag. "Mom," she said, "Dr. Nolan already signed. This is temporary guardianship, just to keep everything legal. Derek and I will handle things for you." Temporary guardianship, 4 words, and I could see the net already strung. I took the paper and scanned it. Under Dr. Nolan Pierce, the blue ink was fresh, dated yesterday right after my birthday party. I picked up the pen from the flower vase, pretending to hold it to the light to read better. Meanwhile, I memorized every detail: the font, the slant of the signature, the oval seal in the right corner. It would all be evidence. Handing it back, I kept a faint smile. Very thorough of Dr. Nolan. Amazing how quickly he remembered me. Alana exhaled, thinking I'd softened. But in my head, the gears of a plan had already started to turn. Brittany clapped softly. "Great, I'll help you pack. You don't need to worry about a thing." I followed her upstairs, keeping my mild expression. My room, once scented with lavender and old books, felt oddly bare as Brittany rifled through drawers. "Take this," she said, pointing at pajamas. "And these, leave them. They provide everything there." I watched her hands, fingers heavy with rings, lift the valuable items one by one, the vintage watch, the gold bracelet, the jewelry box. I pretended not to notice and asked, "What about those papers?" "What papers?" Her tone turned wary. I pointed to a desk drawer where I'd deliberately left a folder labeled Asset Authorization. Brittany opened it at once, eyes lighting up. Inside were old utility bills and bank flyers. She laughed and shook her head. "Why keep all this junk, Mom? I'm old. I keep it to remember," I said softly. Inside, I smiled. First trap sprung. Near noon, the doorbell rang. Derek called from the kitchen. "Dr. Nolan's here, Mom." I drew a long breath and went downstairs. Nolan Pierce, the doctor I'd trusted for more than a decade, stood in the living room with a black briefcase. He smiled politely. "Good to see you, Mrs. Carver. You look a bit tired today. Just a few quick questions." He took out a printed questionnaire. His voice was flat, mechanical. "What day of the week is it? Can you read your home address? Do you know who the current president is?" I answered clearly, steady and precise. He nodded vaguely, slashing his pen across the page, barely looking at me. When he went to sign the last page, I tilted my head and asked mildly, "Dr. Pierce, did you review my MRI from last year? The one you signed stating my memory is completely normal." His hand paused. Just a second, but enough for me to see a flicker of panic. I'll look into that," he stammered. "No rush," I smiled. "I just want to be sure you remember your longtime patients." Behind him, Brittany shot Derek a quick look. Both stayed silent. The exam ended fast in a stiff silence. Nolan signed, snapped his case shut, and left without meeting my eyes. As the door clicked, Derek turned to me, rushed. "The flight leaves at 4 p.m. You should have an early lunch and rest." "So soon?" I asked lightly. "Tickets already booked?" I just want everything to go smoothly, he said, evading my gaze. Brittany rolled a small suitcase upstairs, packing a few outfits, a notebook, and random items enough for the first few weeks. I noticed every valuable thing from jewelry to documents had been removed. She zipped it closed and smiled wide, like a cut. All set, Mom. They'll take great care of you. You just rest. I nodded. I will rest, but not for long. When they left, the room went quiet. I sat on the bed, looking at the tiny suitcase, the sum of what they thought should be my remaining life. I laid my hand on the cold metal latch. Under the calm, I knew I wasn't a cornered old woman anymore. On the table, my smartwatch blinked the night's recording, already backed up to the cloud. I opened my laptop to check for Renee's reply. Nothing yet, but the signal was out. I stood, straightened the curtains, and looked at the backyard where I'd once taught the kids to plant sunflowers. The flowers still turned their faces to the light, as if they believed the sun always returns. I smiled faintly. Maybe I'm like them. In a few hours they'd think I was following the plan, but once that plane took off, I wouldn't be a forced passenger. I'd be ready for another journey, taking back justice with my own hands. The taxi had been waiting since 7 a.m. I heard the engine and smelled exhaust drifting through the window. Derek hauled the suitcase out first. Brittany did one last sweep of the house like a new owner. She paused at my wedding photo with Richard, tilted her head, and murmured to Derek, "We should sell this place soon, before prices dip." I gripped the stair rail so my hands wouldn't shake. Every slate step under my feet was Richard's handiwork. He laid each stone our first winter here. At the last step, I knew I was leaving not just a house, but 40 years of my life. "Let's go, Mom," Derek said softly, taking my elbow with polished tenderness. I smiled and nodded. No one knew that inside my sweater I'd sewn a small strip of fake hair hiding a slim USB with all their betrayals. As the car door shut, Brittany told the driver, "International Terminal, Gate 2." I looked out the window. The oaks in front swayed in the morning wind, leaves falling like a farewell. I fixed the image in my mind, not knowing if I'd ever see it again. The drive to the airport was 40 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. Derek stayed quiet, checking his phone. Brittany kept instructing me, "Remember, Mom, someone from Santa Lucia will meet you. Your room is ready." I turned to her with a mild smile. "I know. You're very thorough." She missed the irony and nodded. "We just want the best care for you." At the airport, I was processed like a special assistance passenger. Derek held a thick folder labeled medical travel file and handed it to the passport agent, adding quietly, but clearly, "She's traveling for a health program. Everything's prepaid. Please help us get her on board safely." It sounded like I was fragile cargo. When they finished, Brittany leaned in and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'll call you as soon as you land, okay?" I looked her in the eye and said softly, "I'll be sure to call you right when I need to." She smiled, not catching my meaning, and walked away. On the plane, I had a window seat. The sky outside was a heavy blue-gray curtain. I took a tissue from my bag and held it to my mouth like a habit, really to cover my hands as I loosened the fake hair strip and slid out the razor-thin USB. In the dim light, I labeled the audio files with a tiny pen. 1. 71st birthday night. 2. Guardianship plan. 3. Dr. Nolan. Each title was a blade I'd hidden up my sleeve. I put my phone in airplane mode, opened email, and drafted an unsent message titled, "If I Disappear." I attached the first recording and saved it as a draft. If someone grabbed my phone, they'd see nothing unusual, but the data would be safe in the cloud. As the plane climbed above the clouds, I looked down at Portland one last time. Small streets, mist-topped roofs, the Kennebec River catching the light shrinking like an old photo pulled away from my fingers. I laid a hand over my chest, my heart beat slow and steady. No more shaking. I wasn't afraid. I was waiting for the right moment to strike. 8 hours later, we landed in Lisbon in a soft, golden afternoon. The air smelled of salt and ripe oranges, a scent I once loved in my younger years that now tightened my chest. At arrivals, a middle-aged man in white uniform held a sign with my name, Sylvia Carver Residencia Santa Luzia. I walked up with a polite smile. Mrs. Carver? I'm Luis, the center's coordinator. Happy to welcome you, he said, courteous and empty. I'm sure you are, I said dryly. A small silver car carried me from the airport, past cobblestone streets and balconies draped with purple flowers. If not for the circumstances, I might have loved this city. But to me, Lisbon wasn't a new land, it was a gilded cage. Residencia Santa Luzia sits on a low hill overlooking the Tagus River. The building is bright white, glass walls reflecting the late afternoon sun, the orange grove fragrant. Everything is designed to look like a luxury resort, but all I could see were invisible bars. The manager, a tall woman with curled hair and a professional smile, welcomed me in the main lobby. Welcome to Santa Luzia, where life begins again in peace, she said in fluent English. I answered softly, peace, huh? We'll see. She handed me my medical file and flipped through the pages as she read aloud. Mrs. Carver, 71. Diagnosis: mild cognitive impairment. Risk of wandering. Requires regular supervision. I closed my eyes and memorized every phrase. Mild cognitive impairment. Risk of wandering. That's the language that legalizes confinement. My room was number 207 on the second floor. The window faced the Tagus, where the sunset spread like honey on the water. Everything was clean: white bed, small table with a vase of oranges, beautiful to the point of empty. I opened my suitcase, just a few outfits, a notebook and an old coat. No family photos, no wedding ring, no letters from Richard. You have a roommate, the manager said, pointing to the opposite bed. An elderly woman with silver hair was embroidering a handkerchief. She looked up, smiling kindly. I'm Donna Teresa, 82. You just arrived? Yes, I said. They told me this is a wonderful place to rest. She gave a small smile, eyes sad. You get used to it. Everyone says that when they come. I nodded, but all I felt inside was a long stretch of cold. That evening they brought my first meal: pumpkin soup, bread, and a small pill on the tray. I asked, "What is this?" "Pill?" The nurse smiled. "Just a multivitamin. Helps you sleep." I didn't take it. I slipped the pill into my pocket and wrote in my notebook, "Evening pill, unknown contents." When night fell, the river's waves mixed with the light wind outside the window. I sat at the table and switched on the small lamp. Warm light spread across a blank page. I opened my notebook and wrote the first line, Day 1, Lisbon. The taxi is gone, the house is gone, but I still have my memory and my evidence. Tomorrow, call Renee. Begin. I closed the notebook and let out a long breath. In the dark, Donna Teresa snored softly while I stayed awake. Every sound of the night felt like a countdown. I knew life in this beautiful prison would test my patience. I also knew that in every overbright corner of Santa Luzia, I would find a way out. I lay back on the bed and stared at the stark white ceiling. The smell of cleaner mixed with a sharp orange scent. I closed my eyes, but I didn't pray for sleep. I just repeated 3 words like a quiet vow. Remember, wait, strike back. Tomorrow morning, when the sun comes through the window of room 207, I'll start the next chapter not with tears, but with a first phone call. The fight to reclaim my dignity had started, and this time I'm the one holding the keys. The next morning, Lisbon's sunlight slanted through the window of room 207, lighting the white curtain as if nothing were sad here, but I knew light doesn't erase the feeling of being locked in. I ate breakfast in silence, the oatmeal already cold, the multivitamin warming in my palm with my body heat. I quietly tossed it down the bathroom drain, then opened my notebook and drew a line. Day 2. no pills. Around 10 a.m., I went to the nurse's station and offered a gentle smile. I'd like to make a video call to my granddaughter. She misses me. The young nurse, named Sophia, answered softly, "Of course, Mrs. Carver. The computer's in the common room, I'll turn it on." The old computer sat in the corner, silver-framed monitor, keys worn smooth. When Sophia stepped away, I opened the browser and typed the email address, only Renee Park, and I knew. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I typed fast, no accents, no greeting. "Renee, I'm safe. At Santa Luzia, Lisbon. They lied about my condition. Need urgent help. S." I hit send, then pretended to open Zoom to complete the act of calling my granddaughter. Not even 10 minutes later, a new mail chime sounded. I opened the inbox, and when the subject line popped up, my breath stopped. From Renee Park, subject, urgent reply. "Where exactly are you?" "Derek just brought your death certificate to the bank to withdraw all assets. They say you passed away in Lisbon." They didn't just want the house and the money, they wanted to wipe me from the legal record, as if I'd never been their mother. Have you ever seen a loved one treated cruelly just because they were old? Share how that felt in the comments, so voices like this aren't forgotten. I went numb. My fingers fell from the keyboard. The characters on the screen blurred. So they weren't only removing me from my home, they were erasing me from legal life. They buried me on paper. It took me nearly 5 minutes to breathe normally again. Once steady, I opened a reply and typed slowly, one word at a time. "Renee, listen closely. Temporary guardianship signed by Dr. Nolan Pierce, dated the day after my birthday. Sent to Lisbon was forced. Derek and Alana hold my passport. Brittany took assets. I have recordings. Freeze everything now. Sylvia." In less than 10 minutes, her response arrived. "You need to sign an emergency power of attorney so I can file for a protective order and freeze the accounts. I'll send an international form valid between the U.S. and Portugal with consular verification instructions." I printed on the center's machine. They didn't notice, signed all 3 copies, then asked Sophia to scan and send to my daughter in the U.S., really sending them straight to Renee. Renee replied right after, "Step 1 done. I've filed the freeze request. I'm sending in a colleague in Lisbon, attorney Miguel Duarte, to support you. Be cautious. Don't trust anyone there." I closed the computer, my heart still racing. In that moment, I knew I'd just reclaimed the most important thing, the right to exist on paper. At noon, the facility manager came into my room wearing a stiff smile. "Mrs. Carver, I need to verify your file. There are a few items to add." She opened her case and pulled out a thick stack of papers. I glanced over it. Passport copy, medical records, admission form, treatment consent. All bore my signature, but not written by me. I feigned confusion. "I've signed so many forms, I don't remember. May I take another look?" She hesitated a few seconds, then nodded. I flipped page by page, eyes noting every detail, stamps, dates, and especially the line that read, "Mrs. Carver has moderate cognitive decline." I looked up. Which doctor certified this? "Dr. Nolan Pierce, your physician in the States. That's his original signature." I gave a thin smile. "Right. The same man who confirmed I was fine 6 months ago." She looked flustered, then hurried to gather the papers. "Either way, please rest assured. Your family loves you very much. They call every day." I tilted my head. "Do they? Then why haven't I heard them?" They said you need quiet." I smiled, the kind of smile you give when you know you're being lied to but pretend to believe it. When she left, I took out my phone, quietly switched on the recorder, and captured the entire meeting. Every sentence, every rustle of paper, any of it could be evidence. Near dusk, while I was walking in the garden, an older caregiver who seemed honest leaned close and whispered in halting English, "Your family told us, be careful because you are very confused. They said you already sold your house, so we shouldn't let you contact the U.S." I stood still, looking up at rows of ripe oranges releasing their scent. So this was the perfect plan. Lock me abroad, fake the medical file, then erase me from U.S. records. I gave a sad smile and told him, "Thank you, but I remember everything, every number, every word they said." He looked surprised, nodded, and quietly walked away. Back in my room, I photographed the entire Santa Lucia file, especially the page with the official seal, and sent it to Renee. I compared it with the copy Derek had sent the bank from the photo I'd taken at home before leaving. The two seals were completely different, one real, one fake. I knew once Renee had them, she'd have enough to file suit. That night I sat by the window, the Tagus breeze cool on my face, orange scent mixing with the bland smell of disinfectant. I opened my phone and started combing through social media, a habit I thought I'd dropped. Brittany Carver came up first. Her profile was full of photos, a new handbag, a fancy dinner, the caption, "Finally free." I curled a smile. Free, huh? She won't feel that way for long. Scrolling down, I found Alana's post. A photo of white lilies with the words, "Today, my mother left this world peacefully. Rest in peace, Mom." Dozens of people offered condolences in the comments. Someone wrote, "She was a wonderful mother." Reading those words chilled me. They had truly killed me, not with knives, but with words, with signatures, with a fake seal. I closed the phone and looked in the mirror. I didn't see a weak woman, I saw a face fully awake. I whispered to my reflection, "You want to bury me alive? Fine, I'll be the ghost that won't let you sleep." Lisbon's night was unusually quiet. Only the wall clock ticked each second. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Day 3 Portugal. Renee got the email. Miguel Duarte will come. Derek declared me dead. Alana cried online. Brittany spent money. They think they've won. They forgot. I'm alive." And I remember. I folded the notebook, set down my pen, and looked out the window. Moonlight glittered on the Tagus. "Richard," I whispered, "I promise you, the children you raised will face justice, not with rage but with truth." I turned off the light. In the dark, I felt calmer than ever. I wasn't a prisoner anymore. I was someone hiding in the enemy's stronghold, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the clock hit midnight, I closed my eyes and smiled. Tomorrow, I'd meet Miguel Duarte. And then the curtain of lies my children built would start to tear piece by piece. The next morning, I was told I had a visitor. When I walked to the lobby, I saw a steady-looking middle-aged man in a light gray suit holding a black briefcase. He introduced himself in gently accented English. "Mrs. Carver? I'm Miguel Duarte, associate of attorney Renee Park. I'm here to support you legally." He showed a bar card from the Lisbon Bar Association. Everything looked proper and professional. I shook his hand, feeling a firm, warm steadiness, the exact thing I needed. "Renee filled me in," he said as we sat at a small table in the lounge. "I need to verify some data before we move to freeze the accounts. Here, you have the right to request access to your own medical and financial files, including admission records." I nodded. "I'll do everything. They used the law to bury me. Now I'll use the law to bring me back." Miguel smiled and opened his laptop. "Exactly." He walked me step by step into the patient portal, a tool I never thought I'd need. From there, we downloaded all admission charges, billing, and the medical proxy form Derek sent to Santa Lucia. Everything looked tidy, except for one detail that chilled me: my electronic signature. I zoomed in. Sylvia R. Carver appeared clear. The slant familiar, but it wasn't mine. I write with a slight left slant. This one tilted right. Neat to the point of mechanical. Miguel pointed gently. IP address of the signer 198.62.4.177. Ring any bells? I shook my head. He continued, "It's registered in Maine, right in Portland, and the address matches Derek Carver's home." A cold line ran down my spine. I looked up, my voice hoarse. So he signed for me. Exactly. Under federal rules, that's electronic identity fraud. Very serious. Miguel immediately sent the data to Renee. In under an hour, I got her reply, "I've filed an emergency motion to freeze all co-owned accounts. Banks in Maine and Boston have been notified. Derek can't pull another dollar. I've also requested a freeze on his secondary cards, including the medical credit card opened under your name." I read that line again and again, like breathing after days of suffocation. But that was only the beginning. Miguel slid his chair closer and opened another file. "Do you know this company?" On screen, Blue Ledge Ventures LLC, registered in Delaware. Owner, Derek Carver. Chief accountant, Connor Reeves, Alana's husband. I curled a smile. "A shell company." Miguel nodded. "Exactly. Started 8 months ago. I just found 3 transfers from your accounts totaling more than $480,000 flowing into this company within 2 weeks before you died on paper." I went quiet. The hurt was gone. Only a spreading cold remained. "They really did their math," I said slowly. Miguel clicked through screenshots from social media. Derek at a handover ceremony for a new boat, arm around Brittany. The caption, "Grateful for a fresh start." Another, Brittany trying on a diamond ring in a Boston store, smiling bright enough to blind. And Alana, my daughter, posting, her gleaming marble kitchen, finally finished a little dream. I looked at the images, not angry anymore, just empty. Motherhood's supposed to be unbreakable, reduced to assets, shares, and balances. I folded my hands and said quietly, "Save everything. All of it. Every photo, every word." Miguel nodded and stored it all on an encrypted drive. He asked, "Anything else we should add?" I answered, "I have recordings, photos, and doorbell camera data from my house. We need to stitch them together. Prove they didn't just take money, they orchestrated the whole thing." That afternoon we worked for more than 3 hours. Miguel linked each chain of evidence: the birthday night recording, the forged signatures, Derek's home IP, and the medical expense payments. He called it a sealed chain of proof. "When this chain is tight enough," he said, "no lawyer will be able to save them." I nodded, feeling a bit lighter. For the first time since leaving Portland, I didn't feel alone. 2 days later, Miguel returned with news. I met with Santa Lucia's board. Once they heard about the false admission paperwork, they got worried. They're now willing to cooperate, handing over all records, audio, and camera footage. They don't want to be dragged into international collusion. I gave a small laugh. Finally, someone knows how to be afraid. He placed copies of what they'd sent: admission receipts, health status forms. In the medical history line, italicized, "Patient previously diagnosed with moderate cognitive decline per Dr. Nolan Pierce." Miguel looked at me. "Renee is preparing a court order compelling Nolan to release your real medical records. I expect results soon." That afternoon, I sat by the window, the Tagus breeze cool. A strange feeling spread through me, not hatred, but resolve. What I'm doing isn't just about money or reputation. I'm taking back the right to trust myself. 3 days later, Renee's email arrived. "Sylvia, we obtained Nolan's records. It's all clear. 6 months ago, he signed normal cognition. But the version Derek submitted says moderate decline. Signature date exactly matches the day Brittany booked the Lisbon tickets." In other words, they coordinated it, and Nolan knew. I read slowly, my temple pulsing. Everything fell into place. Brittany booked flights. Nolan signed a fake diagnosis. Derek moved money into a shell company. Alana announced a peaceful passing. A perfect chain if I were actually dead. Miguel looked at me, voice firm. You're not a victim now, you're the plaintiff. We have enough evidence. We just need time to finish the filings before we go public. I stared out at the Lisbon sunset on the river. The light stretched like a ribbon of melted gold. In that moment I thought of Richard, the man who taught me that every wrong leaves a trace, if you're patient enough to follow it. Now I had all the traces. I closed the notebook and added one last line for the day. Day 8 Santa Lucia forged signature found. IP. Derek's house. Accounts frozen. LLC. Blue Ledge Ventures exposed. Nolan Pierce, complicit. The game has turned. When I finished, I put down the pen and lifted my head to the sunset. The breeze carried a hint of orange blossom, and I felt an odd calm. I don't need violence for revenge. I just need the truth to do its job, and it's doing it very well. That night before bed, I opened an old Christmas photo of our whole family. I looked at each of my children's faces and said quietly, "You chose money over your mother, but I choose justice over tears." Then I turned off the light and let darkness cover the room. In the silence, I could hear my heartbeat, no longer afraid, steady and firm, like someone becoming herself again. On my 9th morning at Santa Lucia, a knock sounded just as I was finishing my journal line. When I opened the door, Miguel stood there with the facility manager, her face stiff, her polite smile forced. "Mrs. Carver," she said in a gravelly voice, "we've reviewed your admission file. There are some serious errors." Arms folded, Miguel answered calmly. "Legal errors, to be precise. I've notified the consulate and Portugal's Ministry of Health. If the center doesn't want a criminal investigation, the best option is to let Mrs. Carver leave immediately." I watched the manager's face drain pale. After a few seconds of silence, she nodded. "Of course, we'll issue discharge papers at once. Reason: admission based on inaccurate information." 3 hours later, I received the official document, the red seal still wet. I set it on the table and looked at it for a long time, as if it were my first ticket to freedom after months of confinement. While I packed, my roommate, Dona Teresa, stood in the doorway, eyes wet. She held my hand, her voice trembling. "Do what we didn't dare. Seek justice for those buried alive here." I hugged her tightly. "I promise. And when this is over, I'll send you a card to prove we still have a voice." My suitcase was light, a few clothes, a notebook, and the USB stitched deep inside my sweater pocket. Miguel walked me to the car. Santa Lucia shrank in the rearview mirror, white walls, blazing orange groves. I knew I'd never forget that sweet scent, the smell of freedom laced with bitterness. The U.S. consulate in Lisbon sits on a leafy street, the American flag rippling in the noon sun. Stepping through the gate felt like walking back into the part of my life that had been cut off. Miguel introduced me to a consular officer, a young, solid woman named Emma. "We've been briefed on your case," she said. "We'll record this as international fraud, but first, we need to verify your identity and your cognitive status." I smiled. "I'm more than willing, as long as no one calls me incompetent again." The evaluation took over an hour. Memory, response, reading, writing, arithmetic. I answered clearly, even recalling Richard's social security number from 1989. When we finished, Emma smiled at me. "Mrs. Carver, I'll state in the report, fully lucid, fully aware of actions and circumstances. Welcome back to the legal status of your own citizenship." I smiled through tears. Every paper and seal today didn't just restore my name, they restored me. Miguel walked me out into the sunlight, glinting on his hair. "Renee just texted," he said. "A court in Maine has issued a temporary protective order for you and the property. All transactions to sell your house are suspended. They can't do anything further." I exhaled, like dropping a boulder from my chest. "So, I can finally go home." "Yes." He nodded. And when you're back, we'll let them step confidently into the trap they dug themselves. 2 days later, I boarded a flight back to Boston. For 10 hours, I couldn't sleep. Each engine vibration kicked my heart, as if I feared this was only a dream. When the wheels touched down, I gripped the armrest and breathed deep. The smells of coffee, exhaust, and melting snow wrapped around me. Renee waited at the international arrivals door. Without a word, she hugged me hard. Warmth spread through me, pushing out the months of strangeness. "We did it," she whispered, "and don't worry, I haven't told them you're alive." The quieter we are, the harder your punch. We left the airport in her black SUV. Boston lay under mist, buildings reflecting a pale green glow. I watched familiar signs and streets, the ones that had carried me to school and brought me home at dusk. "What's next?" I asked. Renee opened a thick file and smiled. "The bait plan. I've sent formal invitations to Derek, Brittany, Alana, and Connor Reeves, your son-in-law. Reason: a final. Supplemental inheritance closing at the notary office. They believe they're getting the rest of your estate." I nodded, lips pressed. "And I'll be the surprise gift at that meeting." Renee nodded, eyes sharp. "I've prepped hidden cameras, recorders, and a faux packet titled Irregularities in the Estate. We just need to tug at their greed. Once they speak for themselves, there's no walking it back." That night at a small hotel by the Charles, I looked in the mirror. My face was older, my hair grayer, but my eyes were different. No fear, only clarity and steadiness. I took scissors and cut my hair to my neck. Silver strands fell to the floor, light as old burdens. The next morning, I stopped at a glasses shop near the hotel and switched to round frames. I looked a few years younger. The clerk said, "You look much more energetic." I smiled. "Thanks. I'm about to see my family, after a fake funeral." Renee arrived with a new packet and a heavy silver gray coat. "Wear this," she said. "When you step into the room, the light will catch and they'll freeze." I nodded, took it, and asked, "Do you think I'll shake?" "You might," she said honestly. "So here's a trick. Breathing practice. Facing them, inhale through your nose for 4 counts. Hold for 2. Exhale through your mouth for 6. Keep your heart rate under 80. Don't let them see you angry. You don't have to shout to win." That evening, I paced the room, walking slow and steady like someone relearning how to step into life. I pictured the notary door opening, 4 faces lifting eyes going dead when the dead woman walked in. Before bed, I wrote a letter, my hand shaky but firm. "Dear Richard, I'm about to do what would make you proud. Not revenge, but restoring the truth. If someday I don't get to say this, I've forgiven them, but I haven't forgotten. Forgetting lets lies live on. When this is done, I'll burn this letter." I folded it and set it beside the small notebook that had traveled with me the whole way. Outside, snow began to fall, whitening the street. I watched from the window, my breath fogging the glass. Tomorrow I won't be the woman forgotten in Lisbon. Tomorrow I'll return to my real name, Sylvia Carver, and the story they thought was over is just beginning. The notary office was on the 8th floor of a glass building in downtown Boston. Winter light slanted through the windows and bounced off the polished floor. Every detail was set: long table with a gray cloth, a hidden camera in a planter, 2 tiny recorders under the tabletop. The air was cold, still, and seemed to be holding its breath for the storm. Renee ran one last check, then looked at me. "You sure?" I drew a long breath, keeping the rhythm she'd taught me. "I'm sure. Time to show them the person they thought they buried doesn't die so easily." "Then let me start," she said, straightening her collar and stepping out. Leaving me to wait in the next room, thin door cracked just enough to see everything. Exactly 10 a.m. They arrived. Derek led, black suit, tight face, sly eyes dulled by lack of sleep. Brittany followed in a deep red dress, lipstick darker than usual, laughing with Alana and Connor as if this were a celebration. "I told you, just the last formality," Derek said loudly, full of confidence. "Renee said it's just a few signatures." "Thank God," Brittany replied. "I'm sick of lawyers reading every page." Alana, my daughter, nodded, but her eyes showed nerves. Connor, my son-in-law, held a folder, more awkward than all of them. Renee stood, wearing her professional smile. "Welcome. I'm glad you're all here. Today, as in the invite, we'll do a final review of the supplemental estate of Sylvia Carver." They sat. Chair legs scraped the floor with an ugly squeal. Renee opened her folder, voice light but firm. "Before we sign, we need to clear up a few inconsistencies in the legal file. First, the death certificate." She set a copy on the table, turning it toward them. "This is the version submitted by Mr. Derek Carver to Portland Trust Bank, dated April 16th. However," she placed another page with a fresh red seal, "this is the official confirmation from Residencia Santa Lucia, Lisbon, Mrs. Sylvia Carver was discharged on March 24th, fully lucid, and signed in her own hand." The room froze. Derek went rigid, face as pale as the paper. Brittany leaned toward the confirmation, voice cracking. "This must be administrative confusion. In Europe their paperwork is messy." Renee raised an eyebrow, still calm. "Administrative confusion? I thought so too until I checked the digital registry. There's also video of Mrs. Carver signing her discharge." Alana covered her mouth. Connor stared down, avoiding everyone's eyes. Derek leaned forward, forcing steadiness into his voice. "Regardless, my mother, she was very weak. The center could have made a mistake." Renee nodded slightly, as if she'd been waiting for that. She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up. On it was a social post. Brittany Carver in a white dress, smiling in a fancy restaurant, with a caption, "New Freedom, New Beginning." "This," Renee said slowly, "was posted March 25th, the exact day Mrs. Carver was taken to Lisbon." "Care to explain?" Brittany's throat closed. Her fist clenched, a chip flaking from her nail polish. "It was just a joke. A joke about freedom the day your mother-in-law died on paper?" Renee's smile turned cold. "Hilarious." Connor tried to interject, flustered. "I think we should stick to the inheritance process." Renee pivoted, voice sharp as a blade. "Then tell me," Mr. Connor Reeves, who filed the tax return for Blue Ledge Ventures LLC, a company funded with money withdrawn from Sylvia Carver's accounts. Connor opened his mouth with no sound. His throat bobbed, then rasped. I only did accounting support." "Derek said it was the family's investment fund," Renee cut in. "And you didn't find it odd that the fund launched right when your mother was declared incompetent and then dead on paper?" No one answered. Only the clock ticked and breathing grew loud. Brittany hissed at Derek. "You said everything was handled." "Shut up, I'm handling it," he snapped. That was my cue. I pushed the door. The hinge gave a small, eerie creak. 4 faces turned as one. I walked in, slow and steady on the wood floor. "I'm here," I said, voice calm but ringing. Very alive. And very clear. Time stopped. Alana burst into tears, hands shaking over her mouth. Connor's chair scraped back as he went pale. Brittany froze, eyes wide, then lunged for her phone, jabbing at the screen as if she could erase old posts. Derek, my son, swayed, bracing on the chair back, mouth open with no words. I stepped to the table and set down a small USB. The dry click sounded like a coffin tap. "Listen," I said evenly. "Listen to yourselves how you divided your mother that night." Renee hit play. The audio came through clearly, every laugh, every word. "When she dies, we split it evenly. And that jade bracelet, I'm taking it. Send her to Lisbon. They keep old people like prisoners there." Brittany's small laugh, Derek's hand slapping the table, and Alana's soft voice. As long as Mom doesn't suffer, I won't object. The room went still. None of them could meet my eyes. Only the recorder kept running, its red light blinking steady. I looked at each face, the ones I'd kissed goodnight, the hands I'd held through fevers now bowed like children caught stealing. I spoke slowly, firmly. Do you remember? When Richard died, we promised never to let this family fall apart. Yet you buried your own mother. For money. You sold off trust, and now that trust will be the evidence against you. Brittany gulped. Mom, what you heard. We were just angry. I gave a thin smile. Angry? What about the fake death certificate, the fake accounts, and the new Freedom Post? Anger or calculation? Derek finally found his voice hoarse. Mom, we were afraid you'd be scammed, taken advantage of. I wanted to protect you. Renee let out a small laugh, the kind that waits for a line like that. Really? Because the statements show you moved more than $480,000 into your own company. I looked straight at my son. Remember what I taught you? Good intentions never need forged papers. The room sank into silence. Then click the second recorder chimed, marking that the entire meeting had been captured. Renee stood, slid the USB into a sealed envelope. Thank you. We're done. Everything you just said will be forwarded to federal court and the Maine State Police. Derek lunged up. No! You can't. Renee cut him off, ice cold. We can. Because your mother, the one you declared dead, re-signed all legal documents 2 days ago. She's the plaintiff. And you, unfortunately, are the defendants. I pulled my gaze back and turned to leave. Behind me, Brittany collapsed into a chair, sobbing into the ticking of the clock. Derek said nothing, gripping the table until his knuckles went white. At the door, I looked back once. You claimed I wasn't clear-headed enough to manage my life. Today, I proved the opposite. Then I stepped into the hall. The door closed behind me, sealing in the smell of failure and guilt. Outside, winter light flooded everything. I took a deep breath and heard my heartbeat slow, steady, free. Their game was over. As for me, I was finally the one holding the cards. Police arrived the next morning. 3 black cars stopped in front of the notary building, lights flickering, softly on the glass. Inside the conference room, the air felt dense, like there wasn't enough oxygen. 4 of them sat in a row. Derek, Brittany, Alana, and Connor, each with a different look, but all with the same thing underneath. Fear, badly hidden under fake calm. Renee sat across from them, stacking documents neatly. I sat beside her, quiet, hands on the table's edge. In front of us, 2 officers and a representative from the Maine Attorney General's office watched. The formal confrontation began. Renee started by playing the recording they thought they'd erased yesterday. Brittany's voice came first, thin, sharp. Sell the house, fast. If we wait, her papers expire, and we'll have to redo everything. Derek's voice cut in. I've done the math. 60% from the house, 20% from savings, 20% from company shares. We split it, and no one says a word. Then Alana, shaky but clear, as long as the guardianship has Dr. Pierce's signature, everything's legal. The words rang in the dead quiet room. I didn't look at them. I stared at the screen. Each sentence was a blade now driven back into the mouths that formed them. When the audio stopped, Renee said gently, "That was the first excerpt. Now, the financial evidence." She opened the second set. Bank statements, rows of numbers, transfers into Blue Ledge Ventures LLC. $480,000 moved from Mrs. Carver's accounts while she was under treatment. Here's the boat deposit for Derek, Brittany's diamond receipt, and bank login IP history from the Portland address. Sweat beaded on Derek's lip. I don't know about that. Could be a system error. Renee slid one more page over. What about this internal email? From Connor Reeves. Subject: Need to mask the transfers, code them as medical costs. Connor went chalk white, head down. I just followed instructions. Derek said it was temporary. Renee didn't answer. She signaled an officer to note it. I watched their faces crumple, one by one the children I raised and taught manners, now ducking their mother's eyes like midday thieves. Suddenly, Derek shoved back his chair and dropped to his knees in front of me. Mom, we were wrong. We were scared you'd be alone, scared something would happen without us there. So we tried to control things. I looked at my son once, a source of pride, now a hollow ache. Afraid I'd be alone, I repeated, voice tight. So you killed me on paper? Forged medical records? Declared me incompetent? Then split the money? That's your version of love? He broke down, but I had no tears left to share. Brittany cut in, hissing through her teeth. I just did what my husband said. He said it was for your benefit. Renee gave a small smile and picked up a tablet, pressing play. Brittany in a living room, wineglass in hand, telling friends, finally no more toxic mother-in-law. I feel like a boulder's been lifted. The laughter in the video echoed around the room, harsh and cold. Brittany shot to her feet, face blazing. It was a joke! I didn't know anyone recorded it. The security camera in your home did, Renee said. And it was uploaded 24 hours before Mrs. Carver passed away. The room fell silent again. Only the sound of wind slipping through the door crack, the smell of fresh ink, and the tang of nervous sweat remained. Alana, my daughter, spoke through a tremor. Mom, I didn't do anything. I was just worried about the kids. If this blows up, they'll be affected. You love your grandkids, right? I looked at her, my chest tightened, but my voice stayed even. Which grandmother did you make them mourn, Alana? Their real grandma, or the shadow you created to legitimize your filings? Alana burst into sobs, but I didn't move closer. Those tears were no longer apologies, just fear as the walls of calm, lies collapsed. Renee opened the medical file and set out 2 versions, one original, one fake. Here is Dr. Nolan Pierce's signature on the real report diagnosis. Normal cognition. And here is the fake one Derek submitted. Moderate decline. If you compare the signatures, you'll notice something interesting. She placed the pages side by side. Even a person who couldn't read would see it. The handwriting was identical right down to the final ink dot. Renee only smiled. He used the same pen, the same handwriting, the same typo from last month's prescription. A sloppy doctor, a foolish scheme, and enough to put all 4 of you in prison. Derek clenched his fists, snapped. What do you want from us? Renee stayed calm. Not me, Mrs. Carver. I looked at my son, lowered my voice, each word dropping heavy. I want one thing, truth and justice. Right then, Renee's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then nodded to the officer. The freeze orders are now in effect. Every account, asset, and company tied to you is locked. The police are ready to take statements. Brittany shot to her feet, screamed, No! I have small children! I can't, the officer replied evenly. You'll be allowed to call an attorney. The air thickened. I sat still, watching each of them grasp at flimsy excuses. Alana collapsed into her chair, face in her hands. Derek fell quiet, eyes drifting. Renee turned to me and murmured, You can choose. We can push full criminal charges, or you can set civil conditions if you want to leave a way back. I thought for a moment. Then I spoke clearly. I'll choose the lighter path if they accept 3 conditions. She nodded, signaling the prosecutor to record them. I continued. 1. Repay every dollar taken. 2. A public apology in court and to the media, admitting wrongdoing. 3. Mandatory therapy for at least 6 months to learn what remorse means. The room went dead still. Derek looked around, then shouted like a plea. No, you want to humiliate us? I answered softly, but each word cut through the air. No, I want you to face yourselves. That's what I taught you, and you forgot. Brittany stood, voice choked. We won't apologize publicly. Do whatever you want, sue us. I held her gaze for a long second, then nodded slowly. Fine. Then I'll see you in court. Renee gathered the files and signed the minutes. The police began escorting them out one by one to take separate statements. As Derek passed me, he stopped, eyes full of desperation. Mom, if you do this, I lose everything. I looked at him, offered a small, aching smile. You chose to lose me first, Derek. This is just the consequence. The door closed. Only I, Renee, and the pale gold light through the blinds remained. I sat quietly, no longer angry, holding a feeling I could barely name, exhaustion mixed with peace. Renee rested a hand on my shoulder and said gently, You just won the first battle. I answered softly, No, Renee. I just won my name back. Winning or losing, that's the court's job. I stood and looked out the window. The snow had melted. Boston sunlight washed the building across the street. In that moment, I understood that sometimes justice doesn't arrive with a gavel strike. It arrives when the person buried alive stands up and says, clearly and loud, I'm still here. 2 months after the confrontation at the notary office, Boston was still cold, but I'd grown used to this kind of cold yet clear, like justice coming into focus. They hadn't. My entire family was now officially defendants in a case for fraud, forged notarization, elder abuse, and money laundering through Blue Ledge Ventures LLC. Things I used to only hear on the news had become my real life, Renee told me, calm but firm. Prepare yourself, Sylvia. The first hearing will be heavy, but what you say isn't for revenge. It's to end a chain of lies. I nodded. I didn't shake anymore. The indictment ran nearly 40 pages. First was Derek Carver main counts, forged notarization, asset theft, abuse of trust against an elderly person, and interstate money laundering. Then Brittany accomplice, evidence concealment, and profiting from fraud. Connor set up a shell company and helped legitimize the money flow. Alana indirect accomplice, but considered for leniency due to cooperation. And then the name that chilled me, Dr. Nolan Pierce, the man who once shook my hand in his exam room, smiling, You're still sharp, Sylvia, was now under a federal investigation list. The U.S. Medical Investigations Bureau found that within 8 months, he received 11 consulting fees from the shell firm Reeves Accounting, each exactly $7,500. Every payment matched the windows when Derek needed medical reports to finalize guardianship. Miguel sent me a memo, payments disguised as expert consults for elderly patients, no supporting medical records. Funds transferred directly from an account managed by CFO Connor Reeves. The American Medical Association immediately suspended Nolan. Former patients spoke up, saying he often copied diagnoses literally copy-paste from other charts. A 79-year-old woman said, He labeled me early dementia when I came in for joint pain. Reading that hurt and relieved me. It wasn't just me, many older people had been prey in a diagnosis-for-profit system. Derek hired an expensive New York attorney, a salt-and-pepper man with an oily, smooth voice. In front of cameras, he claimed his benefactor was a victim manipulated by a greedy wife. It was all Brittany, he said. She controlled my client's emotions to seize the mother-in-law's assets. Brittany hit back. She appeared in black, face wet with tears, declaring, Derek forced me to sign. I did it because I was afraid of him. I had no power. Connor, the quietest one, was nailed by his own emails. One line was read aloud in court. Don't worry, Derek. I'll mask that transfer under your mom's medical expenses. Running it through the LLC will cover it. Those words landed like hammer blows. Only Alana, my daughter, bowed her head and admitted it. During her statement, she said in a shaking voice, I knew they were wrong, but I didn't dare speak up. I was afraid of losing my family, my job. I just wanted Mom to be safe, the prosecutor asked. Safe by declaring her dead? Alana broke down. then signed a partial plea, handing over all family group emails and messages. When Renee showed me those emails, I sat still for over an hour. Some lines made it hard to breathe. Let her think it's a vacation. When it's done, she won't have any rights left. Sell the house fast before she changes her mind. Each word was a nail driven into me. Still, I signed to submit them to the court. Renee and Miguel worked non-stop. They compiled everything I had: journals, recordings, photos, and Richard's letter where he wrote, "All of this was built by Sylvia. I only added a little." The house and savings are the result of 40 years of her work. That letter in my husband's hand became a key legal anchor. Proof the assets were my separate property, not communal property my children could claim. The court granted temporary restitution and restraining orders. None of the defendants could contact me or come within a mile of me or my home. I walked back into my house, the old door creaked its familiar note, and for the first time in months, I felt true peace. A week later, Renee sent me the iCloud extraction from Derek's phone. There was an 18-minute video from our home camera the night I was taken on vacation. They stood in the living room, pulling drawers to inventory. Brittany said plainly, "I'm taking this bracelet. Sell the watch." Derek replied, "Write it all down so there's no questions. She won't remember anyway." They all laughed. Renee looked at me, voice low. "This is evidence of intent to misappropriate assets. There's nothing left to argue." I nodded gently, said nothing. What I felt wasn't anger, just a heavy sadness at how ambition can make people foolish. As for Nolan Pierce, the man in the white coat behind the paper trying to bury me, there was no exit left. The FBI found, beyond the 11 payments of $7,500, 2 larger ones routed through Blue Ledge Ventures marked consultation, legal coordination, Miguel explained. "That's how they laundered it," Nolan signs, "fake medical records. Connor pays under consulting. The medical board launched formal discipline. Dozens of patients filed complaints." On the evening news, cameras caught Nolan leaving court, white coat folded over his arm, eyes to the ground. I wanted to close that chapter, but justice doesn't let you soften too soon. Renee filed supplemental charges: falsifying medical records and conspiracy to defraud an elderly person. Nolan became a separate defendant in a second branch of the case. On the first day of trial, I walked in with my short silver hair and the gray coat Renee told me to keep because you look stronger in it. Across the aisle, Derek stared at me with empty eyes. Alana kept her head down. Brittany wouldn't look up. Connor stayed quiet. When the judge asked, "Mrs. Sylvia Carver, are you healthy and lucid enough to testify today?" I smiled and spoke clearly, each word etched in the air. "Your Honor, I'm 71 years old. My memory still serves, my eyes can still read, and my heart still knows pain. I'm lucid enough to love and clear-sighted enough to know when I've been betrayed." The courtroom went still. I told my story, no tears, no theatrics, just facts, day by day, act by act. I spoke about the birthday night, the pen-scratching percentages, the flight to Lisbon, and the moment I heard my own children say, "Split the assets when she dies." No one interrupted. Even the defense had nothing left to argue. When I finished, the judge said only one line. "To those who claimed Mrs. Carver was incompetent, you've just heard and seen the opposite." I turned to Renee. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "The strongest blow isn't revenge, Sylvia. It's standing steady before those who tried to crush you." I nodded. I knew justice had a way to go, but the hardest part I had already walked. The rest would be theirs, the ones who thought money could buy the truth. The morning snow fell lightly, white dusting the courthouse steps like winter's mourning cloth. But inside me it was a morning of light, no more pain, only clarity. More than a year after that fateful birthday, I entered court for the last time, not as the ward, but as the plaintiff who reclaimed her name. The gallery hushed as the judge read the verdict. His voice was low and firm. Defendant Derek Carver fraud, forged notarization, elder abuse, and interstate money laundering 8 years in prison. Brittany Carver accomplice to fraud, aiding and concealing illegal assets 6 years in prison. Connor Reeves accomplice to money laundering, establishing a shell company, falsifying tax reports 5 years in prison, and barred from accounting for 10 years. Alana Reeves indirect accomplice, cooperated with the investigation, suspended sentence of 3 years and 1,200 hours of community service at a Maine nursing home. I heard each number like dry knocks against the walls of memory. No joy, just the sense that fairness had finally been named. Then the judge continued, Dr. Nolan Pierce for falsifying medical records and conspiring to defraud an elderly person, permanent loss of medical license, suspended sentence of 2 years and civil penalties of $350,000. He is also ordered to issue a public apology. Reporters swarmed as court adjourned, wanting the face of the mother who survived her own death certificate. I said only one short sentence. Justice isn't for revenge, it's to remind us that trust isn't for sale. A week later, the court ordered restitution and civil damages. Derek's boat was liquidated, Brittany's diamond ring auctioned, and Blue Ledge Ventures assets seized. Everything converted to money, more than $3.6 million, including principal, interest, and emotional damages for me. When Renee handed me the check in an envelope, she smiled. You didn't just get the money back, Sylvia. You got yourself back. I looked at the check, but felt only quiet. Not because of the number, because of being seen and restored as the truth. My house in Portland was restored too. I returned on a light, rainy afternoon. The old wood smell and dried cinnamon were the same. I changed the locks, the nameplate at the gate, and placed the new deed into a protective trust so no one, not even me, could lose it so easily again. That night I sat in the living room where arguments once echoed, where I once stood behind a door and heard my children plan to split the assets when she dies. Now there was only the soft tick of the fireplace and candlelight on my husband's photo. Richard, I whispered, I did it, and not with hatred. A month later, I accepted an invitation from the Maine Council for the Protection of Older Adults. They wanted me to speak at a community event to share my story as a warning. That day the hall was small but warm. Over 100 seniors listened closely, some holding hands, some wiping tears as I told the path I'd walked from a quiet birthday to a blazing courtroom. At the end of the event, an elderly woman, around 80, walked up and held my hand, trembling. Thank you, Sylvia. I used to think I was foolish for not speaking up when my son controlled all my accounts. Now I know it's never too late to protect myself. I smiled. And that very night, I wrote a small document 12-point checklist to protect older adults as my promise to them. 1. Always keep at least one separate account in your own name, no joint owner. 2. Make a will with an independent attorney as witness. 3. Review bank statements regularly. 4. Record or save every important medical consultation. 5. Don't sign anything if you feel pressured or hear, we have to rush this for your health. 6. Choose your own doctor and lawyer. Don't rely on referrals from relatives with financial interests. 7. Keep copies of your ID and property titles in a safe place. 8. Use two-factor authentication for online accounts. 9. Teach younger family members how to spot signs of elder abuse. 10. If you suspect something, contact an attorney or protection organization right away. Don't stay silent. 11. Keep a financial journal and a log of medical visits. 12. And last, never think you're too old to say no. I hand out that checklist for free at community meetings, and every time I see an older man or woman accept it with a smile, I feel my heart heal a little more. At the end of spring, I wrote another letter to my grandkids. I know they bear no blame for the adults' tragedy. I love you, but love has to live with truth. When you grow up, remember that wealth isn't in a safe, it lives in gratitude and honesty. Never let greed cloud your eyes. I sent that letter with an old family photo, the only one still intact. That summer, I spent a day returning to Lisbon, but this time not as someone taken away in silence, rather as a free traveler. I visited Dona Teresa at Santa Luzia. She hugged me, tears running down. "You did it, Sylvia. You made us believe justice is real again." I smiled and handed her a small radio and a bouquet of fresh orange blossoms. "So you can hear the world out there and believe someone is listening." We sat on the balcony looking over the Tagus, sunlight gilding the water. For the first time, Lisbon was truly beautiful to me, not a prison but the end of fear. Back in Maine that night, I opened a drawer and found the letter I'd written the night before the inheritance signing, the one to Richard I had never burned. I read it again and smiled. The words in it had come true. I took the letter out to the back porch, set it in a ceramic bowl, and lit it. Flames rose, eating each line, casting warm light over my aging hands. I whispered, "It's time to let the past burn out." I watched until only ash was left, then closed the door. Night wind slipped through the window frame carrying the scent of peace. Now I am no longer someone deceived, abandoned, or treated as a burden. I am Sylvia Carver, the woman who stood up from her own funeral and walked out with 2 hands full of trust again. I sat down and wrote the final line in my journal. Justice doesn't make us young again, but it lets us hold our heads high. And sometimes, that alone is a kind of miracle. After the trial and the months rebuilding my life, I knew there was one last thing to do, not to close a chapter, but to open another path for people like me. One autumn morning, with dew still on the grass out back, I called Renee. "Do you remember the first time I asked for your help?" I said, my voice lighter. Renee laughed on the other end. "How could I forget? Do you want to revise some filings?" I answered, "No, Renee. I want to write a new will." That afternoon we sat at the wooden table in my living room. I read each line slowly, my voice firm like an oath. All current assets, including real property, savings, insurance, and damages with interest, will go to the Sylvia Carver Fund, a non-profit supporting older adults who are abused by relatives, isolated, or stripped of autonomy. Renee looked up, admiration in her eyes. "Are you sure? That's enough for you to live comfortably the rest of your life." I smiled gently. I have enough. But so many are still trapped in homes that are anything but. If this money can open a door for them, that's the real asset. In that will, I left each child $1 a token, not to punish, but to acknowledge they are my blood while making clear they no longer hold power in the name of love. I included a short handwritten note for each. "My dear children, I don't harbor hatred, but I can't pretend to forget. Real love must carry responsibility and honesty. One day, when you're brave enough to look back, understand that what I leave you isn't money, but a lesson in consequences." Renee nodded softly after reading. "You know, Sylvia, those letters may change them more than any sentence." I only smiled. I don't pin my hopes on awakenings, but I trust time, the fairest judge we have. Beyond the Sylvia Carver Fund, I set up a memorial scholarship in my late husband's name, the Richard Carver Memorial Scholarship for nursing students focusing on geriatrics. He used to say, "I told Renee that caring for older adults teaches you kindness. If someone enters this field out of love, I want them to know a woman named Sylvia Carver believed in them." When all the paperwork was done, I chose to leave the big house and start a smaller, quieter chapter. I bought a little home facing Casco Bay, just 2 bedrooms and a sunny balcony. I planted 2 cherry trees out front, one for me, one for Richard, and adopted a gray cat I named Harbor because he arrived on a windy day and curled up by the porch like he wanted to be someone's safe harbor. My new routine is simple and full. Morning, I wake at 6 a.m., and paddle a kayak along the bay in the mist. Midday, I read or write for elder advocacy groups. Afternoon, I practice. Watercolor, mostly Lisbon scenes, once a symbol of fear, now a symbol of freedom. Evening, I brew tea, open my laptop, and answer letters from strangers. Some ask how to find a lawyer, some just want to share that their grandkids don't call anymore. Each letter is a life, and I answer with all the patience I have. I learned something new too, how to cook Portuguese food. First dish, bacalhau à brás salt cod mixed with eggs and crisp potatoes. I learned the recipe from Dona Teresa, my friend at Santa Luzia. With the first bite, I remembered leaving the facility and her words, "Do what we didn't dare demand justice." Now the dish isn't tied to fear, it's gratitude. I call it the freedom dish. Every Sunday I go to a local church where the pastor leaves time at the end for community sharing. I tell my story not to seek pity, but to remind people, saying no isn't a lack of love. Sometimes it's the only way to keep love from becoming a weapon. Afterward, many elders come hold my hand for a long time. Some just cry. They don't need to speak. I understand because I've been in that place where your voice gets swallowed by family silence. One early winter evening, I sat on the porch watching moonlight ripple across the bay, harbor curled under my chair. I thought about the years behind me and finally realized the hardest thing to forgive wasn't others' wrongs, it was not forgiving myself. I had believed the wrong people for too long and blamed myself for being weak. Now I know, weakness isn't a crime, only staying down is. I won't forgive cruelty, but I forgive myself, the woman who once believed kindness alone could hold a family together. That night I wrote in my notebook, I wasn't born strong. I learned strength after almost being erased from my own life. And I knew this is the story I want to leave behind, not just as a memoir, but as a map for anyone lost in fear. Renee helped me plan an open resources release, all forms, hotlines, support organizations, and the 12-point checklist, shared free through a nationwide elder network. I set the release date for March 20th, exactly 2 years after my 71st birthday, the night everything seemed over but actually just began. That evening, after finishing the plan, I stepped onto the balcony. The lighthouse beam swept the bay. A light breeze carried the smell of salt. I spoke softly to Richard, as if he were beside me. See, we don't have to fear losing anymore. In the end, the only thing we keep is what we give away. Harbor rubbed my leg and meowed once. I smiled. In the end, my life found both justice and peace again. Early morning, the ocean breeze from Casco Bay blew across the porch, carrying salt and distant gulls. I poured a cup of black coffee, opened my worn notebook, and wrote the first line of my new book. A Guide to Preserving Dignity in Old Age, What I Learned After Nearly Being Erased from My Own Life. My pen trembled lightly, not from age, but emotion. I'm not writing as a victim, but as a survivor, someone who crossed the ravine of betrayal and returned with self-respect intact. In the middle of the first page, I drew a small circle for the sea, always changing, never lost. My life is the same. Waves can strip away reputation, but if we stand up, dignity returns like the tide. The breeze flipped a few old pages notes from the road I'd walked. I thought of Dona Teresa, who hugged me on my last day in Lisbon and said, "Live for those who no longer have the chance to stand." I thought of Lisbon, once a nightmare, now a landmark of freedom. But more than anything, I thought of the woman in the mirror, the one who didn't fall when the world thought she was dead. Each morning I smile at her, not to find youth, but to greet an old friend. Thank you for not giving up. This afternoon I sat in a sunlit room, opened my laptop, and rebuilt the climb. Birthday night stage in words. I'm not writing to dwell on pain, but so others, those being abused, controlled, deceived, can see there's a way out. I described every detail, the pen scratching on paper, my daughter-in-law's icy voice, my son's empty nod, and finally, the moment I hit record, small act, life-changing result. I wrote slowly, line by line, like opening a door to light for someone else to walk through. On the shelf, Richard's photo smiled, his eyes catching the late sun. I said softly, "See, I'm home now, not just in this wooden house, but in the house of trust and justice." I walked through the house, checked windows, rearranged books and paintings, then locked the front door. I set the key ring in a small wooden box Richard had carved with the words, "Home is a choice." It's the symbol of the autonomy. I took back the right to decide how I live, who I trust, and where I stop. In the afternoon, I opened my laptop. My inbox filled with messages from everywhere. A woman in Texas weighing whether to remove her son from a joint account. A man in Florida saying my story gave him the courage to call the police after years of threats. I read them all and answered each one in the voice I once needed myself. Gentle but firm. Every line is a life. I realize strangers can understand me better than the family who betrayed me. Through them, I know I didn't just survive, I became a voice for those who were silent. At dusk, I stepped onto the balcony, where the sea turned a pale bronze. The last light sprinkled the water like glitter. I closed my eyes, breathed in the salt, and let my mind drift with the waves. I understood that true legacy isn't money, it's how we make wrongdoing, bow and goodness stand tall. I once had millions, then lost everything only to receive what matters most, freedom of the soul. If someone asks whether I regret anything, I'll say no. Without those losses, I'd never have learned the strength of reborn trust. Night fell. I set the laptop on the table and moved my fingers slowly. On the screen was the end of the manuscript. I typed the closing line. Preserving dignity in old age isn't just about protecting assets, it's about protecting your soul in life's storms. Then I saved and hit send draft to the publisher. Offshore, waves beat the rocks like a wordless song. I smiled, feeling the ocean blessing my journey. I whispered to myself, "This isn't an ending. It's the first chapter of peace." I closed the laptop, poured a little red wine, and leaned back in the wooden chair. The sea breeze lifted my silver hair, and Harbor, my small cat, slept at my feet. Everything was quiet, just enough to hear my heartbeat. Slow, steady, at peace. I looked up at the night sky, no clouds, only the moon and thousands of stars. Somewhere out there, someone is hearing this story, maybe a mother, a grandfather, or someone just learning how not to fall. And if they are, I want to say this: you're not alone. Even if you've been deceived, forgotten, or treated as a burden, you still deserve respect, trust, and love. If this story touched your heart, tell me where you're listening from. Every comment you leave is like a small light on a map, showing older people out there, those who feel lonely, hurt, or overlooked, that they are not walking alone. I want to thank you for staying to the very end, for listening to a woman who was pushed into the dark and chose to stand up anyway. A like, a comment, or a subscription won't just help this video travel, it will help other silent voices be found. If today this story made you cry, smile, or simply sit in quiet thought, then I believe that somewhere kindness still lives, and together we're keeping it alive. If Mom doesn't sign today, I'll sign for her. My oldest son's voice sliced through the ICU like a blade, cutting across the beeps of the monitor. I lay there with the oxygen tube deep in my nose, the IV biting my wrist, watching my oldest daughter step up, lipstick cold on her mouth, placing a pen in my hand. "Just sign, Mom. Everything will be fine." My youngest daughter stood behind her brother, head bowed like she was crying. But her eyes stayed glued to the folder titled Asset Transfer and Inheritance Rights. Beside them, a stranger in a black suit opened his briefcase and set a seal on the table, ready to witness the moment they took their mother's estate. I looked at my 3 children, feeling hollow. None of them knew I had seen this day coming. I let the pen drop and heard the dry clink as metal hit the blanket. 3 faces froze at once. because they had no idea the paper they were trying to force me to sign today was something I had made, permanently void a month ago. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Loretta Mae Ellison, 69, a widow for 12 years, living alone by Cedar Lake, a small town outside Kentucky where morning fog rests on the water and sparrows trade songs with church bells. I used to be a counseling teacher, then spent more than 2 decades building Haven Ridge Retreat, a place for women who lost their husbands, helping them find trust and peace again. I'm not rich in the usual sense, but Haven Ridge is my life's work, my years of being a mother, a wife, a woman who stood back up after grief. Now, in these later years, I thought the worst thing would be loneliness, until I realized the deepest wounds can come from people who share your last name. I woke under the cold white lights of the ICU, lines running across my arms, needles buried in my vein like creeping roots. The heart monitor blinked steadily, each beep a reminder I was still alive, even if I wasn't sure any of my 3 children actually wanted that. At the head of the bed, Colin spoke quietly with the man in the black suit looked like a notary. I couldn't catch every word, but I knew Colin's tone, firm, transactional, the voice he used in real estate deals, not when talking to his mother. "I've prepared the forms," the man said. "Once she signs, I'll notarize immediately." Tessa, my oldest, always the organizer, set the pen in my hand, her voice gently fake. "It's just paperwork, Mom. Sign so we can handle everything for you and you won't have to stress." And Jenna, the youngest, stood at the foot of the bed, eyes rimmed red, speaking softly like comfort. "We just want you to feel at peace, Mom. It's just one signature." I looked at each of them, 3 faces that used to be my pride, now as distant as strangers. The way they stood close, traded looks, and spoke to me with half-sweet, half-cold voices told me this wasn't their first conversation about it. They had a plan. And today, I was. The final checkbox on their contract. I tried to lift my hand, but my body was weak, my fingers shaking. I felt the cold pen in my palm. "Hold it for her," someone said, probably Tessa. Another hand pressed lightly on my wrist. I heard Colin sigh like he was waiting on a deal that had dragged on too long. Then Jenna's voice near my ear. "Just sign, Mom. This will make everything better." Her tone was sweet, but I could hear the emptiness in each word. I didn't sign. I let the pen fall. The tiny sound metal on blankets seemed to echo in the silent room. All 3 of them stopped. Colin bit his lip. Tessa frowned. Jenna looked down. The notary cleared his throat and politely closed his briefcase. No one said another word. Then Colin muttered, "What a waste of time." I watched them leave one by one. No goodbye, no hand squeeze. Just the smell of antiseptic and the steady beeping of my heart. I breathed slowly, feeling a pain in my chest that wasn't from my heart, but from somewhere else deeper, older. I once thought nothing could hurt me more than losing my husband. But today I understood, the greatest pain isn't losing the person you love, it's watching the ones you gave life to turn their backs on dignity. When the nurse came in, I pretended to sleep. I needed time to piece things together. The name Cedar Lake surfaced where I've lived nearly 30 years, where I built Haven Ridge Retreat, a place for widows. I turned it into a safe home where hundreds of women learned to stand again after loss. Haven Ridge is my life's devotion, my memories, and my husband Jack's, who passed 12 years ago. I once thought I'd pass it to my children so they could continue the work. I believed in their goodness until I realized the only thing they saw in Haven Ridge wasn't its worth, but its value on paper. A month ago, when my breath felt shorter each day, I quietly met with attorney Naomi Keats, who had helped with donations and estate matters before. I told her I feared that if I ever fell ill, my kids wouldn't ask, "Are you okay, Mom?" But "What are you leaving?" Naomi didn't look surprised. She just met my eyes and said, "If you want to protect what you built, do it before they realize you're still clear-minded enough to act." The next day, I signed everything to transfer Haven Ridge Retreat to the Widow's Lantern Foundation, an independent nonprofit serving women who've lost loved ones. From that moment, Haven Ridge was no longer personal property. It belonged to the people who needed it most. None of my 3 children knew. I didn't plan to tell them, at least not yet. I still hoped I could find a bit of trust in them before revealing the truth. But tonight, when I heard Colin order, "Bring the notary in," I knew my silence had saved me. After they left, I lay still for a long time. The fluorescent light cast a cold glow, my shadow pooling on the white blanket. In the steel frame's reflection, my face looked pale, older than it should. But in my own eyes, I recognized something I'd lost: resolve. I'm no longer the mother who keeps her head down, afraid to lose her children's love. I'm Loretta, the woman who built a house of peace from the wreckage of her life. And I won't let anyone turn that legacy into a bargaining chip. I turned toward the IV line, took a deep breath, and whispered through a rough throat, "Kids, I've already prepared." When the nurse returned to adjust the machines, I closed my eyes again. But my mind was sharp with every word and step I'd take once I got out. I would document everything, the times, the words, the actions of each of them, so no one could twist the story. They think I'm just a confused old woman, a name on paperwork that's easy to replace. But they forgot, I'm the one who wrote all of this, and only I have the right to write the ending. The door they think opens to treasure has been locked for a long time. I hid the key where they'd never think to look: a place called justice. And when I leave this hospital, they'll learn that what they just tried to take hasn't been theirs for a long time. That afternoon, exactly 1 month before I was in that hospital bed, the lake was still as glass. I stood at the second-floor window, where late light spread like a gold cloth over the water. The pink-red glow slid across the pines and bounced off the glass, throwing back a face I knew yet felt distant, mine, more tired than ever. At 69, I've gotten used to my body slowing down. Every morning, climbing the stairs from the office to my small apartment above, my chest felt like an invisible hand was squeezing. The light pains on the left side came more often. At first I called it fatigue. I used to teach others to listen to their bodies, and when it was my turn, I pretended I couldn't hear. I kept moving, kept working, kept being strong, like it was my job. From that room, I could see the whole of Haven Ridge Retreat, the last 20 years of my life. White-painted cottages ringed the lavender garden, a gravel porch where widows meditated or journaled every morning. At the end of the stone path was the common room, the heart of Haven Ridge, where I brewed tea, baked, and listened as they spoke of their dead. Some sat in silence an hour and then burst into tears for the husband they lost. I sat beside them, saying nothing, just holding a hand. Sometimes comfort isn't words, it's someone patient enough to sit with you. I believed Haven Ridge was my life's calling. I led so many women through their darkest days, yet in that evening light, looking over the still water, I realized I was the one who hadn't left grief. I'd lived 2 decades among tears, lost stories, and memories of Jack, who died on a snowy February morning. I built Haven Ridge to heal others, but accidentally locked myself inside a house of sorrow. I sat at the window desk and opened my laptop. The inbox overflowed: thank you notes from former guests, donor invites, financial reports, event newsletters. I skimmed past everything and stopped at drafts. One title glowed: Widow's Lantern. I'd typed it days ago and left it. The body held one sentence: I'm ready to do something that isn't about grief anymore. I don't remember why I wrote it, only that tears slid down before I noticed. Deep down, I knew I was tired of carrying everyone else's meaning, tired of being the strong one. That afternoon, Renee Porter stopped by. She's 58, Haven Ridge's director of care, the person I trust most. She set a warm box of waffles on my desk and smiled. "Working this late again? I know you haven't eaten." I brushed it off, but she didn't. She sat and looked me straight in the eye. "Loretta, I'm serious. You look weaker. Every time you climb the stairs, you grab the rail. You can't keep this up." I wanted to wave it away, say I was fine. But I saw real worry in her eyes. She lost her husband to cancer, tried to be tough the way I am now. She knows the price of caring for everyone else while forgetting yourself. She spoke slowly, like she didn't want me to fight her. "It's time to rest, Loretta. Not because you're weak, because you've done enough." I was quiet. Outside, the light tilted. The lake turned amber. I watched the willows throw shadows on the water and thought of Jack. He planted them years ago, saying they'd grow up with Haven Ridge. They're tall now, shading the path. And I, the planter, have started to slow down, to drain out. "Renee," I said softly, "if I'm not here one day, what happens to Haven Ridge?" She didn't answer right away. She set her hand on the desk and gently squeezed mine. "I don't know. But I do know that if you collapse suddenly, this place loses its soul." The words tightened my chest. I knew. Better than anyone, Haven Ridge revolved around me. I signed every decision, approved every project, held every license. I meant to build a home for community, but I'd made it dependent on one person, me. That evening after Renee left, I sat in the dim until the hallway lights clicked on. I reopened the widow's lantern draft and stared at that single sentence. Screen light lifted the lines at my eyes. Maybe it was time to let Haven Ridge become something bigger than me, beyond a mother, a widow, a worn-out founder. I didn't want it to die with me. I wanted it to live after me. When I left, I paused at the main gate. The wooden sign had darkened with age. A breeze carried lavender and damp wood. From inside came laughter, women learning joy again. I closed my eyes and let that sound pass through like a goodbye. I knew something was different that evening. Not just the light, an unmistakable feeling that a chapter was closing. In the car, sunset flared in the rearview, almost too bright. I suddenly felt this might be my last time seeing Haven Ridge this way as an owner. Next time, it would be a legacy, no longer under my name. Back at my lakeside house, the light gilded the water. Tiny waves tossed gold onto the porch. I parked but didn't shut off the engine. In that moment, I knew, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of leaving without protecting what matters. I went inside, switched on the lamp, opened my laptop, and found Naomi Keats's number, the attorney who'd helped with last year's charitable paperwork. My cursor hovered before I called. "Loretta? I thought you'd clocked out for the day," she answered gently. "Not yet, Naomi," I said. "I'm just getting started." That night, I knew my decision was set. Under the warm desk light, I wrote one line in my notebook. "Tomorrow, I'll give Haven Ridge to the people who need it before my children take it." Outside, the night had settled. A thin moon skimmed the lake. The glow was soft but steady, just like the feeling inside me. Quiet, not weak. I knew that evening sun was the sign of a beginning. The next morning, I got to Haven Ridge earlier than usual. Fog still hugged Cedar Lake. The path in felt so still I could hear my shoes crunch the gravel. It was familiar and foreign, like walking through my own memory. Papers from the night before waited on my desk. I poured black tea, sat, and opened my contacts. Naomi's name appeared, note beneath it, Attorney Charitable and Community Assets. I took a long breath and called. "Loretta, I've been expecting you," Naomi said, warm but professional. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure," I said calmly. "I want a foundation not owned by anyone. It will carry on what Haven Ridge began." That afternoon, I drove to Naomi's office in Lexington. Autumn leaves drifted over the hood, and I thought of what's fallen from my hands in this life. My husband, my youth, and now my trust in my children. But amid the losses, there was something I could still keep meaning. Naomi greeted me with a light smile and serious eyes that felt trustworthy. She poured coffee and spread clean pages across the table. "What will we call it?" she asked. I looked out the window at the rising sun flashing on the glass. I thought of the little candle we lit at memorials in Havenridge, the one cradled by widows' hands, symbolizing hope and strength after loss. "Widow's Lantern Foundation," I said. "The flame isn't just for the dead. It's for the living learning to go on." Naomi nodded and took notes. "We worked for hours." She explained each clause: transfer of ownership, board structure, non-profit bylaws, independent authority. I listened, noted, and signed each page like a farewell to a piece of my life. 2 witnesses came: Renee Porter, my trusted colleague, and Victor Lane, our longtime accountant. Both understood the weight of this moment and stayed quiet. No, one asked why. Only Renee's glances seemed to ask, "Are you sure?" I nodded. When Naomi finished the last clause, she looked up and said clearly, "As of today, all assets, land rights, facilities, and operational authority of Haven Ridge Retreat are legally transferred to the Widow's Lantern Foundation. No shares remain in your name, Loretta. More importantly, none are in your children's names." I went still. It felt like a seal pressed onto my old life. I was both relieved and empty, the same feeling as when I took off my wedding ring for the last time after Jack died. Part of my heart was released, the other part knew nothing would be the same. Naomi closed the file and slid me a notarized copy. "Keep this safe. I recommend a separate storage location, physical and digital, and tell no one until you truly want to." I smiled. "I understand. Some silences protect what's right." That evening it rained lightly in Cedar Lake. I turned on the lamp, opened the wall, safe I'd had installed, and placed every document transfer papers, foundation confirmations, witness list, bylaws into a moisture-proof envelope and locked it away. Then I photographed everything and uploaded it to a private cloud folder only Naomi and I could access. Holding those papers, I thought of my 3 children. Tessa, who calls herself the best manager in the family, Colin, who sees Haven Ridge as an asset with growth potential, and Jenna, the gentle youngest who quietly sides with the stronger voice. I love them, maybe always will, but trust between us cracked long ago. I once thought I could tell them that forming the foundation was to protect our family's work. Then I understood. When love is mixed with greed, explanations become kindling. I didn't tell them. Not out of secrecy, but because the timing wasn't safe. Some decisions, if revealed too soon, are twisted before they can take root. I reminded myself, love doesn't mean handing over unconditional power. I'd raised them with such plenty they believed everything was theirs by default. Today, I'm relearning love, clear-eyed love that protects what must be protected. At 9 p.m., I closed the laptop and leaned back. The desk lamp threw my faint reflection onto the rain-streaked window, brown silver hair, lines like a map of time. A flicker of fear. If I don't wake up tomorrow, will anyone understand I did this not out of selfishness but to safeguard value? Then I smiled. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing the right thing while fear sits beside you. I drew the curtains and listened to rain on glass. The yellow light warmed the quiet room like a promise. I wrote the day's last line in my journal. Tonight I locked the door they'll try to pry open. I'm keeping the key, not to hide, but to wait for the right knock. Before bed, I typed a short email to the interim board of the Widow's Lantern Foundation Naomi's nominees. 2. Community psychologists, an independent financial advisor, and Renee Porter. I've completed the transfer. This foundation doesn't belong to me. It belongs to those who will need it. I am the starter, not the holder. I hit send. The tiny message sent successfully banner brought a strange swell in my chest, part sorrow, part peace. Outside, the rain eased. A silver streak skimmed the lake, reflecting the porch light. I closed the door slowly, carrying a quiet I hadn't felt in years. That night, Cedar Lake drowned in mist. I stood at the window, watched water run down the glass, and told myself, from now on, Havenridge isn't mine. But it will live, and the light from the widow's lantern will go on even when I'm gone. I don't remember when I collapsed. Maybe in the office. Maybe by the kitchen doorway where I make morning tea. I only know that when I opened my eyes, the room was all harsh white light, steady beeps, and the sharp smell of disinfectant, like waking inside a cold dream. I wanted to ask what happened, but my throat burned and only a rasp came out. A young nurse noticed I was awake and ran to get the doctor. They said things like transient cardiac ischemia, a few days of monitoring. Lucky it wasn't too late. I nodded so they'd be at ease, but my mind was on something else. Do my kids know I'm here? The answer came fast. That afternoon, the door swung open. 3 familiar faces, Colin, Tessa, Jenna. With them, a stranger in a black suit carrying a leather case. "Oh my, Mom, you're awake!" Tessa blurted, half surprised, half awkward. She set a tiny bouquet on the table, but I saw it was plastic, the kind you grab from the gift shop by the elevators. "The doctor says you're past the danger point," Colin said, voice hard like a revenue report. "But you need to rest and avoid stress, so it's best we settle everything now." I squinted. "Settle what?" Jenna slid a chair close, holding my hand, her voice small. "Just a little paperwork, Mom. We'll help manage Havenridge so you won't face legal issues." Before I could respond, Colin signaled to the man to open the case. The metal latch clicked cold as ice. A thick stack landed on the bedside table. "This is a temporary power of attorney," Colin said. "Sign, and we'll handle the banks, donors, and agencies. You won't have to worry." I stared at the page's tiny print, signature tabs already marked. My eyes blurred, but instinct made me sharper than ever. This wasn't temporary. It was permanent. We should do it quickly. "Mom's weak," Tessa coaxed, voice so persuasive it felt foreign. "The notary is here. It'll take minutes." The man nodded. I felt the IV pinch, my throat close. The heart rate on the monitor ticked like a warning. I tried to speak, but couldn't. My breath caught. My hand went numb. Colin lowered his voice to the girls. "Just get it done. She can't fight it. If we don't do it now, later will be too late." Tessa pressed the pen into my hand. "Just sign, Mom. You've worked your whole life. Let us take it from here." Jenna leaned closer, sweetness turning false. "Sign, Mom, so you can relax." I heard every word, every breath. My 3 kids, the ones who once argued over slices of my pie and called me a superhero when I kept us afloat after their dad died, now stood here not to care for me, but to take. I tried to lift my hand and only managed to hold the pen loosely. I felt a sting at the IV site and a chill rushing up my arm. Through the haze, I heard Tessa murmur, "Hold Mom's hand steady." Jenna's hand landed on my wrist, soft but firm. Colin stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, eyes indifferent. I let the pen fall. A small, dry click on white fabric. No one spoke for a few seconds. The air felt sucked out of the room. Colin inhaled hard and dropped a flat line. "Fine. If you don't want to, then rest. But don't say we didn't take care of things." Tessa picked up the pen and slipped it into her purse. She said, "Let's go," without looking back. Jenna was the last to step out, gently closing the door. I saw her lashes tremble, but I couldn't tell if it was from nerves or guilt. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone under the cold white lights and the steady beeps of the heart monitor. No scent of flowers, only antiseptic. I lay still as tears burned down my temples. I wasn't crying from weakness. I cried because I had seen this coming, and I had prepared for it. 3 days later, I could sit up. They removed the oxygen tube. A nurse helped me practice breathing and eat thin porridge. My body still hurt, but my mind was strangely clear. I asked to borrow a phone to call family, but I really wanted to call Renee. When she heard my voice, she froze. "Oh my God, Loretta, I just heard you got sick." And before I could get there, Colin called the office this morning. I gripped the phone. "What did he say?" "He said you're not well enough to work and that you agreed to let him temporarily run Haven Ridge. He said staff might need to help sign a few things while you recover." I closed my eyes and breathed deep. Anger rose, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I just felt sorry for the blindness that greed can plant in the children you raised. "Renee," I said softly, "I want everything left as is. No transfers, no new accounts, no one enters the office without me, okay?" "Of course," she answered quickly, firm. "I'll tell accounting and the team. They only take direction from you." I smiled weakly. "Thank you. And one more thing, remember, Haven Ridge isn't mine anymore. It belongs to the Widow's Lantern Foundation. All documents were transferred 3 weeks ago." There was a pause, then Renee gave a small laugh. "So you already did it. I had a feeling." "Yeah, I said. I just didn't think I'd see this day so soon." After the call, I asked the nurse to bring my handbag from the locker. I took out my phone and opened my private cloud folder. Everything was intact: signed PDFs, confirmation minutes, notarized copies. I opened a new note and typed slowly. "June 4th, ICU. Colin brought a notary. Tessa assisted. Jenna present. Tried to force a power of attorney while patient on IV, not fully capable. I did not sign, no consent, no legal authorization." I saved the file, titled it ICU Forced Signature, and uploaded a copy to my backup cloud. Then I attached it to an email and sent it to Renee with the subject line, "In case needed." I set the phone down, leaned back on the pillow, and breathed deep. In the quiet room, I could hear the rain on the window and my heartbeat slow, steady. I wasn't a woman lost in illness anymore. I had recorded my first piece of evidence, a legal fence strong enough to protect what I've built. I stared at the ceiling, the fluorescent light glinting off the IV line. Everything looked white, but inside me, a different light was growing. I knew that from this moment on, their efforts would be pointless. The door they're trying to open, I locked it long ago with keys called Law and Clarity. And I swore that once I left this room, I would never let anyone sign for me, never again. 3 days later, the doctor signed my discharge. He spoke gently but firmly. "Mrs. Loretta, your heart almost stopped. If you stay under stress or hide symptoms again, you won't be this lucky next time." I only smiled. To me, it wasn't an accident, it was a wake-up call. My body spoke before my spirit collapsed. Renee picked me up in her old silver car. She climbed out with my wool cardigan I'd left at the office and a small paper bag with hot soup, chamomile tea, and a few cookies. Seeing it made my heart sink, a simple care that didn't demand repayment. No contract, no terms, no signature. Just honest kindness. On the drive back to Cedar Lake, we barely spoke. Fog hung thick, catching the weak sunlight on every branch. I sat in the back seat, holding my medical file tight. The engine's hum was lulling, but my mind couldn't rest. In those 3 ICU days, I had repeated a list in my head what to do once I got home. When the car stopped at my house, I took a long breath. The small lakeside home was as quiet as the day I left, except the wind carried the damp smell of early autumn leaves. Renee helped me in, made tea, and reminded me, "Rest and don't touch work." I nodded, thanked her, waited for her to clear the driveway, then locked the door and pulled the key. The first thing I did wasn't rest. I went straight to the living room, bent down, and opened the cabinet under the bookshelf where the backup safe was hidden. The code still worked. When the soft click sounded, I almost held my breath. Inside, The original deeds transferring. Haven Ridge to the Widow's Lantern Foundation were stacked neatly, along with 2 witness confirmations and minutes from the interim board meeting. Nothing had moved. I carefully photographed each page, numbered them, and saved them to a hard drive in a separate cloud only Naomi Keats and I could access. Then I put everything back and locked the safe with a new code. This time I added another character, one more layer of comfort. I stood and looked around, everything familiar, yet distant. This home once echoed with my kids' voices at Christmas, now only wind slipped through the doorframe. I sat on the sofa and checked my phone. 3 new messages. Tessa, rest up, Mom, don't overthink. I'll visit soon. Colin, let's talk this weekend, Mom. A few things need your confirmation. Jenna, not a word. I stared at the 3 lines, and a chill ran through me. Each text sounded caring, but I heard the voice of interest and the patience of a plan not yet complete. I set the phone down and poured more tea. The chamomile rose light and sweet, but it couldn't lift the weight in my chest. That afternoon, I opened my laptop to check the work inbox. Hundreds of unread emails. One subject jumped out. Legal advisory appointment confirmation. I opened it. My heart thudded. It read, appointment between Loretta Ellison and legal advisor for Haven Ridge Retreat confirmed for 10 o'clock Friday morning. Below it was an electronic signature from Colin. He had impersonated me. Attached was a draft temporary power of attorney, the same thing I refused to sign in the ICU. Maybe any parent knows the unique pain of being betrayed by your own child. I still ask myself, do you believe love has limits? Tell me how you feel in the comments. I read each one like a new chapter in this life. I closed my eyes, counted to 3, and opened them again. No trembling, no fear, just a cold clarity. I hit forward and sent it to the entire interim board of the Widow's Lantern Foundation. In the body, I wrote, please reconfirm the governance structure. As of May 12th, all management authority for Haven Ridge Retreat belongs solely to the Widow's Lantern Foundation. No member of my family holds any position or legal authority. Any requests or contacts contrary to policy should be reported to me and attorney Naomi Keats. I attached the organizational charter, signed electronically, and sent it. When message sent successfully appeared, I exhaled. Once more, the door they tried to pry shut itself tighter. Evening came on. Late light streamed through the window onto the wooden table where I keep my old notebook. The cover was worn, the first pages still stained with old coffee. I opened it and wrote, clearly, June 4th ICU. Colin called a notary, brought power of attorney papers. Tessa assisted. Jenna stood by. They said Mom should sign for peace of mind. I did not sign. Then Colin left, irritated. Tessa packed the files. Jenna said nothing. All remembered. I paused, dotted the page, then added, I never thought I'd have to write this. But it's necessary to protect the truth if I can't speak. I closed the notebook, pulled a separate page, an action list, and numbered it. 1. Call Naomi Keats, confirm Haven Ridge's legal status. 2. Notify the board about Colin's impersonation. 3. Contact installers, set up a home camera system. 4. Update medical directive, remove decision rights from the kids. 5. Change emergency contact to Renee and Naomi. 6. Cancel the old power of attorney I granted years ago. Each time I finished a line, I drew a firm stroke through it. It felt like locking every door and sealing every gap they might slip through. I worked until dark, the warm lamp spreading a soft band across the table. Outside, the lake caught the distant glow of neighbors' lights. I stood, pulled the curtains, and saw my reflection in the glass, small but steady. Before bed, I wrote another letter by hand. Thick cream paper, my handwriting shaky but clear. Dear Naomi, if one day I lose capacity, open this envelope. Inside are journals, notes, and legal evidence of my children's recent actions. I trust you to protect the truth. Sincerely, Loretta M. Ellison. I sealed it and wrote on the front, "Open only if Loretta loses capacity." I placed it in the wall safe with a copy of my ID and an asset list. Done. I turned off the lights, leaving a small one on the bookshelf. In the quiet house, the ticking clock sounded like the heartbeat of resolve. I wrapped myself in the cardigan Renee brought and sat by the window, looking out at the dark lake. Everything seemed asleep, but I knew the real fight had just begun. And this time, I would not fight with tears, but with evidence, with the law, and with the calm of a mother who used to trust too easily and has finally learned to trust herself. That Sunday, the Cedar Lake sky was cold and gray, no sun, just a breeze through the pines by the porch. I just poured tea when I heard an engine settle in the driveway, the low growl of a black SUV, the kind Colin uses for important meetings. My heart beat slow, not surprised. I knew the vague discussion from their weekend texts had arrived. The engine cut, doors opened in near unison. Colin stepped out first, white shirt buttoned to the collar, dark suit, shoes polished to a mirror in the dim noon light. He adjusted his tie, the habit he has before a deal. With Colin, everything is transactional, including family. Behind him came Tessa, hair in a tight bun, sunglasses covering half her face though there was no sun. On her left was Jenna, the youngest, carrying a reusable water bottle, soft sweater, expression calm to the point of artificial. Watching them approach my door felt less like a visit to Mom and more like a shareholders' meeting. I opened the door before they could knock. "Come in," I said evenly. Colin walked straight in without a greeting. Tessa pressed her lips together. Jenna tried a stiff smile. They sat on the sofa while I stayed standing, keeping distance. "We need to talk," Colin began, placing a navy folder on the coffee table and sliding it toward me with a deliberate calm. "Just a few items to review: power of attorney, medical decision rights, co-managed accounts, and a shared benefit structure for Haven Ridge. We've organized everything." I looked at the stack and didn't touch it. Light from the window flashed off the cover stamped "Legal Draft." I didn't need to open it to know what was inside a replay of what they tried in the hospital. Tessa leaned in, voice smooth like a presentation. "This is just temporary, so things stay stable. If it feels unnecessary later, you can revoke it." Jenna, beside her, dipped her head and added softly, "If you sign, everyone can relax. I know you're tired, but this is for everyone's good." I stayed silent. In that moment, I could hear the wall clock tick, each second dropping into the air. I reached out and pulled the folder close, opened the first tab. Dense legal phrases stared back: durable power of attorney, shared asset authorization, healthcare decision rights highlighted in yellow, ready for a signature. I turned each page slowly. It felt like reading an indictment written by my own children. At the last page, I closed it, set it back where it was, and said plainly, "No." Colin arched a brow. "You haven't read it fully." "I've read enough," I said, calm, low, but clear. "The answer is no." The room froze. Tessa glanced at Colin, signaling. He leaned back and shifted tone. "I don't think you're fully clear-headed. The doctor said you need rest and no stress. Are you sure you understand everything that's happening?" I looked him in the eye. "I'm clear enough to know trust has broken, and once it's broken, no. Paperwork fixes it." Jenna squeezed her bottle and stared down. Tessa exhaled sharply, trying to stay composed, fingers rubbing the purse edge, eyes unsteady. Colin braced his elbows on his knees, leaning toward me. "I don't want to argue, but you're making this harder. This is about Haven Ridge, the family's asset. If you keep this stance, I'll have to find another way to protect it. Understood?" I answered slowly, each word touching the air. "Colin, Haven Ridge doesn't need protection from me. It needs protection from my children's greed." Silence fell. Outside, A draft lifted the curtain. I stood and walked to the door. "This conversation ends here," I said, hand on the knob. "If you truly want to care for me, start by respecting my answer." Tessa shot up. "You're just pushing us away. You've changed." "You're not the mom I knew." I turned back, eyes gentle but firm. "Maybe you never knew who I really was. You only knew the mother who yielded, nodded, and endured. She's gone." The room went quiet. Jenna leaned forward like she might speak, then stopped. Colin grabbed his briefcase, face set like stone. Through his teeth, he said, "We won't give up." I nodded lightly. "I know." Then I opened the door. My 3 children walked out without looking back. The door shut with a small, dry click that echoed. A boundary had been drawn between love and control, between the mother they were used to and the woman they can't bend. I stood a few seconds with my hand on the knob, listening as the SUV's engine faded down the leaf-strewn road. When the sound was gone, I let go and headed to the kitchen. On the counter, my morning tea had gone cold. I added hot water. The scent rose and drifted into the quiet. With both hands around the mug, I noticed they were shaking, but not from fear. For the first time in years, they trembled with relief. Not relief from winning, but from choosing my voice over. Compliance. I no longer needed to keep the peace, no longer needed to use endurance as a shield. I sat and looked out the window. Cedar Lake mirrored thin clouds. Nothing outside had changed, but I knew everything inside me had. I had stepped across a line, not loud, not dramatic, just a steady no, strong enough to reclaim the rest of my life. And sometimes a woman's greatest strength isn't in the shout, it's in the moment she smiles and looks straight at the people telling her to be quiet. Last Sunday was the boundary line, and Monday morning the mailman brought the first strike. On the porch lay a large white envelope stamped with the law firm Colin likes to hire. I used a letter opener. Inside, an emergency petition for guardianship filed in County Family Court. Petitioner, Colin Ellison. Supporter, Tessa. Witness, Jenna. The summary was cold as stone. Mrs. Loretta is unstable, easily influenced, needs a representative. I read it all, closed it, and set it on the table like closing a door. I didn't call the kids. I dialed Naomi Keats. "Loretta, I expected this," Naomi said evenly. "We respond now." "I don't want a circus," I said, "but I won't hand myself to greed." "Then we use facts," she replied. "Start with a timeline." That afternoon, I brought my notebook, phone, and a box of files to Naomi's office. On the glass board, she wrote key points: ICU, June 4th, impersonation email, Haven Ridge transfer May 12th, cameras 2 weeks ago. I provided the texts: Tessa's "Rest up," Colin's "Talk this weekend," and Jenna's silence. Naomi nodded. Silence, after a forced signature attempt, is still data. We pulled images of the originals, transfer deeds, witness confirmations. I opened the cloud note, ICU forced signature, Colin brought a notary, Tessa assisted, Jenna present, patient on IV, no signature. Naomi asked me to write a first-person statement describing sounds, words, feelings. "Courts don't just read statutes," she said. "They read people." The next day, Naomi contacted Haven Ridge. Renee sent gate camera footage. Colin tried to badge into operations and was stopped by security. We numbered, time-stamped, and indexed the exhibits. Naomi concluded, "The strategy is to show a systematic manipulation pattern, impersonation, staging, exploiting illness, attempted facility access." I nodded, heart steadying. I got home late. On the porch sat a tray of banana bread wrapped in parchment with a note, "Eat and rest. I stopped by but missed you. Jenna." The smell of ripe banana, butter, and cinnamon pulled me back to when she baked with me. I didn't open the door. I didn't text back. I set the tray in the kitchen and covered it. Love isn't dead, but it no longer drives my decisions. That night I wrote a small declaration in my journal. Saying no isn't cruel. Saying no is building a fence around the replay day. A heart, so love isn't used as a shortcut to the vault. When I set down the pen, my breath felt lighter. In the days that followed, we sprinted. Naomi prepared a thick response, a motion to dismiss, a statement from my cardiologist, confirming capacity, the new medical directive, my cancellation of the old power of attorney, a letter from the Widow's Lantern Board confirming governance, and the full digital log. I checked every error, questioned every comma. Naomi smiled. I appreciate your precision. Friday afternoon, the response was filed. On the courthouse steps, Naomi said, "From here, you shift from defense to offense. They shoved us onto the field. Now we choose the rules." The words clicked a latch in my chest. That weekend, I cleaned house like a recovery ritual. I gathered old magazines, reset picture frames, wiped sills, each drawer arranged like an argument. Orderly, clear, no room for clutter. I opened windows to let fall air in, damp wood mixing with lemon. Oil. I brought in the wind chimes. I no longer needed to fill the silence with noise. At night, I didn't stand guard. Passing cars didn't startle me. Shadows across the lawn didn't send me to the curtains. Under warm light, I reread our filing, holding it like a map. I know where I am and where I'm going. Sunday morning, I carried the bread to the porch. The top had dried, but the scent remained. I cut a slice and brewed tea. I wasn't angry at Jenna, just sad she stood on the fence so long. Sad, but not weak. I bagged the rest and texted Renee, "Pick up when you can. Give to the night shift." I don't eat much sugar. An hour later, the tray was gone, with a note left behind. Got it. R. At noon, Naomi called. Court received it. Preliminary hearing next week. I'll send the schedule. I thanked her and set the phone down. Out in the yard, I clipped lavender and set it in a chipped ceramic vase. The scent filled the kitchen and seeped down the hall. I understood that for years I fed life in others while forgetting to feed life in my own home. Toward evening, I dragged an old cedar chest to the center of the living room. Inside, Jack's letters, cassette tapes of the kids singing, receipts from Haven Ridge's opening days. I didn't burn or toss them. I organized, tied fresh ribbon, and labeled, "Keep not for bargaining. Keep what needs keeping. Let go of the rest. That's how I'll live again." The sun dropped behind the pines, the house washed in a soft blue. I flipped on the porch light, its glow falling across the gray stone path. I realized I wasn't afraid of footsteps anymore. If anyone comes, this door opens on my terms. Inside, there is order. Inside, there is a fence. Night settled. I sat at the table and wrote one more line. I won't prove anything with tears. I'll prove it with timestamps, names, signatures. I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for respect. My peace doesn't hang on someone else's mood. Wind drifted off the lake. I closed the journal and dimmed the lights, leaving one in the kitchen. That small glow pushed back just enough dark like the widow's lantern I named the foundation after. I walked room to room, touching the wood, listening to the house breathe. In that rhythm, I knew I'd left the fragile shore and stepped onto the solid one. The next morning, the mailman knocked again. No heavy envelope this time, just ads. I brewed tea and opened a window. The Cedar Lake sky was clearer than usual. In my chest, space opened not to run, but to move forward. That morning, the sky over Cedar Lake was startlingly clear. I stood at the mirror and smoothed the sleeves of my navy coat, the one I wore at those first Haven Ridge fundraisers, when I could drive across 3 states to raise support for widows with nowhere to go. I chose it not to look strong, but to remember who I am, the woman who once stood at a podium and spoke plainly about value, trust, and how a woman can rebuild her life with 2 trembling hands. The county courthouse sits downtown. A small red brick building with an old dome. Inside, early light streamed through tall windows and lay across the wooden benches like a thin layer of time. I walked slowly, each step treading on years of wounds caused by my own kin. Colin was already there with his attorney, dark suit, composed face like he was the one responsible for everything. Tessa sat beside him, flipping through files. Jenna kept her head down, fingers intertwined, avoiding my eyes. I took a breath and sat across from them next to Naomi. "You okay?" she whispered. "I am," I said. "I just want to hear everything clearly this time and not let anyone speak over my voice." When the judge entered, everyone stood. She was a woman in her early 60s, gray hair in a neat bun, eyes stern but not cold. Her voice was soft yet firm. Temporary guardianship, hearing the matter of Colin Ellison versus Loretta Mae Ellison. On the other side, Colin's attorney stood first and opened the file. His voice was smooth, precise, with a hint of fake regret. "Your Honor, my client only wants to protect his mother. Recently, she has shown signs of cognitive decline and is easily influenced by outsiders, especially Havenridge staff. Her decision to transfer all assets to a non-profit run by others indicates impaired judgment." Each word "decline," easily influenced, dropped and made my chest heavier, but my face stayed calm. I didn't need to argue with emotion. I only needed the facts. When it was our turn, Naomi rose. She didn't raise her voice. She just opened each file and presented them in order. "Your Honor, we submit medical records from Cedar Lake Hospital confirming that Mrs. Loretta has no signs of cognitive disorder. Her cardiac condition is stable, and her reflexes and logical reasoning are fully intact." She pulled up a slide on the small screen. A photo of me in the ICU with an IV, and at the bedside, Colin and 2 women images taken from the hospital camera. She continued, steady. "We are also submitting notes, Mrs. Loretta recorded herself, autosaved to the cloud at the time of the incident. It states, Colin brought a notary, tried to force a power of attorney while the patient was on an IV, no consent." A small camera click sounded from the back row. I glanced at my son, his face unchanged, but his hands were clenched, knuckles white. Naomi moved to the third piece of evidence. Security footage at Havenridge on May 22nd shows Mr. Colin Ellison attempting to use an employee badge to enter the administrative area despite having his access revoked. "We have a written security report." She paused, then unfolded a sheet of paper and read each word clearly. "From Mrs. Loretta's letter to the Widow's Lantern Foundation board. The court doesn't need to protect me from strangers but from my play. Family's illusion of inheritance rights." The courtroom went silent. Only the judge's pen tapped the bench. I saw Jenna turn away, her shoulders trembling slightly. Tessa sat straighter, lips pressed tight, and Colin stared at the table like a man calculating his next move. The judge signaled for me to stand. "Mrs. Loretta, would you like to speak before we recess for deliberation?" I stood with my hands lightly clasped, steadying myself. The room felt smaller, only breath and heartbeat left. I spoke slowly, each sentence clear. "I didn't come here to fight over anything. I only want the peace I worked my whole life to have. I am clear-minded. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I don't need anyone to decide for me. I'm not afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of being lived for by people who no longer see me as a person, but as an inheritance." My voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the wood-paneled room. The judge looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "Thank you, Mrs. Loretta." She called a brief recess and then announced, "The court will recess to review all evidence. A written ruling will be issued in the coming days." When the gavel tapped softly, I drew a deep breath. I didn't feel victorious, and I didn't feel afraid. I just felt steady in the truest sense. Not standing on arguments, but on my own name. Across the aisle, Colin packed his files without a word. Tessa avoided my eyes. Jenna walked slowly behind them, glancing back once eyes wet, half wanting to speak, half afraid to. I gave a small nod. No hatred, no blame. I knew I couldn't save people who don't want to wake up. Outside, noon light fell across the brick walkway. Naomi walked beside me in silence until we reached the lot. She set a hand on my shoulder and said softly, "Whatever the outcome, you reclaimed your name today." I smiled. "And that name," I said, "won't be used to sign for anyone else again." 2 days later, the mailman came again. This time the envelope was thicker, but it didn't feel threatening. I sat at the kitchen table, poured tea, and opened it slowly. Cedar Lake County Court Notice of Ruling. After reviewing all evidence, the petitioner's emergency guardianship request is denied in full. The court notes indications of financial manipulation by involved individuals and refers the matter to civil authorities for further investigation. I set the letter on the table and watched the steam rise from my tea. No gloating, no tension, just a thin but true line of peace running through me. I murmured to myself, "No one can give you your freedom back if you don't unlock it yourself." Midday light came through the window and fell across the page with my name in bold, no strike-throughs, no footnotes. I ran a hand over the words, Loretta Mae Ellison. For the first time in months, I felt my name whole again, not in a complaint, not on a power of attorney form, not in a guardianship file, but in my actual life. I folded the letter and set it beside the warm cup. The mist of steam mixed with the early afternoon light, so light it was almost transparent. I knew the fight wasn't entirely over, but I had won the most important part. I was no longer a victim of my own blind love. I decided not to cancel Legacy Evening, the event I'd scheduled to honor those who had walked with Havenridge, but I changed the guest list. No Ellison name tags, and no donors who like posing with oversized checks. I pulled out my old address book, made calls, and handwrote invites to people who'd been overlooked when Havenridge got too glossy, the high school teachers in town, the retired nurses who once asked to borrow the common room for a support group but were turned away for not meeting criteria, the shelter coordinator for abused women, the one who emailed me 4 times and then gave up. On each card, I wrote the same line in a slightly shaky blue ink. Havenridge is no longer my family's asset. It belongs to those who need it. Hope to see you at Legacy Evening. Some called back right away, voices trembling with disbelief. Others sent a simple, "Thank you for remembering us," and some were silent for days before replying, as if they needed time to believe that a long-closed door had opened. I didn't push. A good door is one people choose to walk through. News of the ruling spread faster than I expected. Colin found out by late afternoon. 3 days before the event, he stood at the top of my driveway, hands in his pockets, no car, no briefcase, just a rare pale look. I opened the door and stood on the porch. He didn't ask to come in. "I want to ask one thing," he said, staring at a slash of sunlight on the step. "Are you throwing away our family's shared vision?" I answered, "Our family never had a shared vision for Havenridge, Colin. You had a vision of assets. I had a vision of meaning." I paused, then said slowly, "I no longer confuse love with blind loyalty. I did for too long." Colin pressed his lips until I could see his jaw go tight. He said nothing more, and turned away like a man who'd missed his train. I watched his shadow stretch across the grass, then break as he turned the corner. I felt no triumph, only calm, as if we had finally spoken in our real language. The language of boundaries. On Legacy Evening, a soft wind moved over Cedar Lake. I arrived early to check the steel-frame greenhouse out back where I wanted dinner to be. String lights looped above, reflecting in small glints on a long table draped in a sandy linen cloth. We laid out simple china and a well-worn set of flatware. No elaborate flowers, just a few sprigs of lavender and rosemary in rinsed jam jars. On each plate I placed a small handwritten note, "You belong here." It was almost blunt in its simplicity, but I wanted it unconditional. I've seen too many doors that say, "Welcome," with lines of fine print underneath. If, as long as, on the condition that Haven Ridge had been like that at times. Tonight I corrected it with one short sentence. Guests trickled in, then filled the room. A silver-haired teacher arrived with a boy whose chin carried a long scar. I remembered him nodding off in the meditation room after a week without a place to sleep. A retired nurse came with a cane and chose a chair near the window. The shelter coordinator came late, out of breath but smiling. "Thank you for the invitation and for the acknowledgement. No family names on the list." I opened one door and closed another. When everyone was seated, I stepped to the small mic at the head of the table. I hadn't prepared a speech. I only knew there was one thing I needed to say, clearly. "Tonight," I began, "isn't to tally credit or blame, isn't to brag about what Haven Ridge has done or excuse what it hasn't. Tonight is so I can finally say what I should have said long ago. Haven Ridge is no longer my family's." The greenhouse went so quiet I could hear a draft slip under the door. I opened a brown envelope and took out the transfer deed and a fresh confirmation letter. My voice didn't shake. I officially announce the land and facilities of Haven Ridge have been transferred to the Cedar Lake Community Trust, an independent community fund. No inheritance, no reversal. No fine print, no back door. From today on, the key holder is this community. For a few seconds, nobody clapped. Not because they weren't glad, because respect rarely makes noise. Then slowly, one person stood. Then a second, a third. They didn't cheer or shout my name. They just stood with damp eyes and hands at their sides, as if greeting something that had been taken from them for too long. I bowed my head. I didn't need anything more. Dinner moved gently after that. Pumpkin soup, toasted bread, apple salad, simple dishes meant for sharing. I walked the aisles, nodding and touching the shoulders of people who had come to Haven Ridge on very hard days. A mailman told me his wife once sat upstairs in the library and read aloud their son's last letter from the service. A grandmother raising 2 grandkids said sometimes all she needed was a place to sit and cry without someone rushing a tissue into her hand to make her stop. In that moment I understood. I hadn't abandoned Haven Ridge. I had returned it to its rightful owners. When most guests had gone, I took one last walk to say goodbye to Haven Ridge, not the building, but the old version of myself there. I went into the library, low shelves, paper and pine. I rested my hand on the spine of On Grief and Grieving, remembering the line, "Loss isn't something to get over, it's something we learn to carry." I went down to the meditation room, gray mats, the sound of wind against glass. I sat on the floor, closed my eyes, and listened to my heartbeat. Then I climbed the wooden stairs, the ones that creaked every morning when I carried a hot mug past. The hall light cast a long yellow strip like a road from youth to now. "Thank you," I whispered as if to a friend. I turned out most of the lights and locked the door. The new keys belonged to the Cedar Lake Community Trust, but tonight I was the one to close up, just once more. Back home, the porch light fell across the kitchen counter. A small sealed envelope sat there with no name. I opened it. Inside was a single slip of paper, Tessa's handwriting clear but hesitant. "I don't understand. Maybe I can't yet, but I'm sorry. No long explanation, no defense." Just 3 words that meant what they meant. I leaned against the counter and read it a few times. The pain didn't vanish, but its hard edge softened. I folded the note and put it in the 3rd drawer, the one for not to decide today. Not forgiving yet, but hurting less. I poured a glass of water and looked out at the lake. The quiet was clean, like rain had washed a film of dust from the porch. I turned off the kitchen light and left a small one by the window, the old habit that says the house is awake for those who need it. But tonight I knew that light wasn't for my kids to come back and take something, it was to light the next part of my life, living without debt to anyone's expectations. I sat by the window and opened my notebook. The last line of the day flowed easily without the catch of the past weeks. Haven Ridge has gone back to the people who need it. I've gone back to myself. I closed the book and listened to the house breathe slow and deep. Outside, wind moved through the pines with a faint trace of lavender from my coat. I rested my head and knew that from here on, I didn't have to guard a gate. My work was to plant a garden again in the house, in my mind, in ordinary mornings. And that night, for the first time in months, sleep came as lightly as a letter with no conditions. A few days after Legacy Evening, the mailman knocked again. No law firm envelope, no court seal, just a cream-colored letter, corners a little curled like it had ridden in many pockets. I looked at the addressee, Loretta Mae Ellison, then turned it over. Colin. My hand paused. I pulled out a chair, poured tea, and opened it slowly so the paper wouldn't tear, as if one rough move might break whatever thin thing sat inside. Mom, I saw the transfer files earlier through public records and a few conversations around the cafe near the foundation building. I thought you would change your mind like before. I waited for you to give in. I trusted that habit more than I trusted you. Today I understand. You have the right to do what you believe is right, even if there's no place for me in it. I'm not asking for anything. I'm only acknowledging you're right. Colin. No, I'm sorry. No, please forgive me. Just a blunt, almost awkward, acknowledgement that I have the right. I folded the letter and set it by my tea. Outside, the lake rippled lightly. I didn't cry. Maybe because my tears had turned into a different kind of quiet, a quiet with firm edges, the kind that knows the difference between genuine feeling and an attempt to steer the story. I called Renee and recited it line by line. She was silent for a moment, then said, Tessa stopped by Haven Ridge last night. Didn't ask to go into the office, just stood outside the glass. I opened the door and she said, No, I just want to stand here a minute. She talked less than usual. I think something settled. Our hearts need a solid bottom to stand on before we can say decent things, I said. We didn't dissect it further. I shifted to Joyce's new pottery class for elder caregivers, a 65-year-old woman leading it. Renee's voice warmed. They're calling it a weekly pot-making night, not therapy. If you're free Friday, come. Bye. I laughed. I will. I do have days now with no meetings. That afternoon I went to the Haven Ridge community room, the one I'd walked through 1,000 times with a to-do list nailed into my brain. Today I sat in the back row with no role, no title, just a woman who wanted to listen. In front, a gray-haired woman rested her hands on her knees and began. She divorced after 30 years of marriage. No sobbing, no rage, just a voice smoothed by weather. Husband gone, kids chose silence, friends thinned like fog. I thought I'd die of loneliness, she said, but I didn't. And one morning I realized the kitchen still had room for a wooden spoon hitting a pan, like the pan was telling me, cook anyway. If no one eats today, then eat it tomorrow. When our eyes met by chance, I nodded. She nodded back, understanding without words. In that nod, I heard a hinge open a little inside me. No fanfare, no trumpets, just accepting that breathing is an act too. The greed. Next day, I walked the lake trail. I used to rush at fast steps, eyes on the watch, counting minutes until I had to be at the office, mind sorting the to-dos. This morning I slowed, stopped by petunias still holding dew, listened to ducks call under the dock, watched the sunlight powder the water like cinnamon on a latte. I thought, maybe I grew old here, but I'm also growing young here, in the way of people no longer crushed by meeting schedules. Back home, I pulled a sticky note from the drawer, wrote with a black marker, and stuck it on the fridge. I am not an asset to be managed. I chuckled. Funny how a line in court can feel cold as steel, but on a fridge it warms up like butter melting in a pan. Maybe that's because the kitchen is where we begin again, where we feed life instead of managing it. At noon, I sat by the window and opened my journal. I wrote the chapter I'd avoided, learning to be alone without being lonely. I didn't lecture, just noted. Small footprints. Brew a pot of tea just for me, but pour it in a pretty cup like when guests are here. Play Jack's old music. Don't rush to turn it off when memory stings. Allow myself not to reply right away, even to kind messages. Replant 3 rosemary bushes, not to cook more, but to rub the leaves and remember I still have sense to live by. Walk the lake every day. No 2 laps need to be the same. I wrote until my hand tired, then leaned back. In the quiet, I notice the sadness still echoes. It passes through the living room, bounces off the glass, even slips into the drawer with Tessa's envelope, but it doesn't run the house anymore. It's a guest who now wipes its feet, sits on the edge of the chair, and leaves on time. At dusk, my phone buzzed. Renee sent a photo. Women laughing, hands covered in clay. She typed, "Joyce says every pot keeps the maker's mistake on purpose. The flaw stays to remind you this vessel came from your own hands." I snapped a picture of the fridge and sent it back, the note that says, "I am not an asset to be managed." Renee hearted it, then called, "Coming to pottery tomorrow?" "I am," I said. "I want to make a pot with my own mistake in it." That night I roasted honey, carrots, and salmon, the simplest dish I know. I plated it on china and tucked a rosemary sprig on top, like I used to when guests came. Then I served myself, ate, and cleaned up. It had been a long time since the house had someone eating dinner without needing to talk about anything important. Before bed, I slid open the 3rd drawer and reread Tessa's note. "I don't understand. Maybe I can't yet, but I'm sorry." This time, "I'm sorry," didn't prick like a needle. It touched and left a small, warm trace. I put it back, the "not today, things should stay where they are." The next morning brought light rain. I put on a coat and knit hat and walked the lake. Wet earth smelled like memories, freshly rinsed. I stood under an oak and listened to the rain on its leaves. Before, I would have used the rain to squeeze in a remote meeting, send emails, update a budget. Now I stood still. I let the rain teach me water's lesson. It falls. It soaks. It doesn't ask permission. Back home, I dried my shoes, put the kettle on, and opened Colin's letter once more. I saw what I'd missed at first. He wasn't asking for anything, and in his clumsy way, he had handed control back where it belongs, to me. A second hinge opened inside, not for anyone to walk through right away, but so the light could step in first. In the afternoon, I stopped by the community room again. The woman who divorced after 30 years spotted me and lifted her hand like you would to a familiar neighbor. We didn't speak. We shared the same room and the same quiet. When we stood, eyes met, and we nodded again. That was enough to know my body was beginning to trust this new peace. After dark, I turned on the porch light and wrote. The words didn't snag anymore. I recorded the fridge note, the walk in the rain, the decision not to call back even after a long message. I added one line to close the chapter. My victory is that I'm not afraid anymore. Not afraid of being called selfish for holding the key to my own life. Not afraid of quiet. Not afraid of seeing my own mistake in the clay pot I'll make tomorrow. Not afraid of closed doors because I know I still have plenty of windows. At Cedar Lake, wind off the water reminded me to draw the curtains. I stood and looked through the glass, my reflection faded, then returned in the kitchen light. I told myself, just like in court and on legacy night, my name is still there, clear and whole, and from tonight on, every breath in this house carries the name Loretta. Not the name of a family line, not the label of a facility, but the mark of a woman who stopped at the right time to step forward the right way. That morning, Cedar Lake was bright, the sunlight like a thin glaze over the water. I put on the cardigan Renee brought and walked the path behind the pines. Joyce's pottery studio sat in an old wooden house by the greenhouse, door painted gray-blue, big windows like a curtain drawn back. Joyce joined Havenridge a few months ago, hair silvered and tied back, voice husky warm like ginger tea. She insists on calling the class, "Make something only your hands can make," not therapy, and not a program. Because everyone has their own flaw, Joyce says. And that flaw is what makes the pot theirs. I didn't go in yet. I stood outside with my hands in my pockets and looked through a film of dust on the glass. Inside, women gathered around wheels, clay wet and shining. Their laughs were small, the kind that touch the corners of the mouth, free laughs you can recognize without sound. One woman slipped and warped the rim. Instead of sighing, she tilted her head and chuckled, like the pot had spoken. Joyce passed behind her, didn't fix it, just touched the back of her hand and whispered something that made everyone smile. I stayed there a long while, filled with the smell of damp clay and sun dust. Something warm rose in me, but without hurry. Along the porch, I stopped at a stone bench under a maple. On its face, someone had chiseled a line, each stroke deliberate. "No one gives your voice back, you take it." I traced the carving. The stone was cold, the words were cold, but the meaning was warm. I had made a long circle to understand this in my own way. In court that day, I spoke a little louder. Now, I don't need volume. I'm using that voice to set my life in order, drawer by drawer, meal by meal, breath by breath. Back home, I brewed tea and opened Colin's letter again. Not to hurt myself, and not to search for an apology that isn't there. I just wanted to see it clearly. He acknowledged my right. That's enough for today. I don't burn the sign. Letter. I fold it and slip it into the cloth-bound notebook. I labeled "Writing About Me," the notebook that doesn't record my children's stories, meetings, medical directives, or transfers. It only keeps my own small things. A still, breezy morning by the lake, the trace of lavender left on my wrist, the shadow I cast on the kitchen floor when I get up at dawn to make tea. The letter lies among those pages like a thread of a different color in the fabric, not pretty, but honest. At noon, I sit at my desk and turn on the computer. There's an old list I wrote before, things to do when I get my breath back. Today's item is anonymous support for 3 families caring for elders at home. I reach out through a small local organization and offer to cover the remaining hospital bills and night caregivers for 6 months, with one condition: don't publish my name. What if they want to know who helped? The coordinator asks. I answer, say it was someone who used to be tired. That's enough. When the transfer confirmations arrive, I exhale. I don't need a photo op. Giving is also a way to speak in my own voice. It doesn't always need a microphone. In the afternoon, I pull the old filing cabinet into the middle of the living room. Oak, heavy, every drawer packed. I spread a cloth on the rug and sit on the floor. Envelopes labeled receipts, pledges, strategy drafts, donor leads. I touch each stack, choosing like I'm choosing seeds. I keep the thank you note from a preschool teacher who brought 10 children to the Havenridge Garden for the first time. I keep the wobbly card from a widow. Here, I'm allowed to be silent. The rest plans that grew into something else. Handbooks that no longer fit. Call lists and meet lists I let go of. I put them in the recycling box, tie the string, set it by the door. The room feels lighter, so do I. At dinner, I set a table for one. I take a cream napkin, place a white china plate with a fine hairline crack like an old vein, and pour water into a tall glass. I lay a sprig of rosemary by the plate, not for anyone to see, but to remind myself, respect doesn't begin on a stage. It starts at a table for one. I sit, eat slowly, and listen to the sound of fork on china. It's been a long time since that sounded beautiful. After eating, I write a thank you letter to the Cedar Lake Community Trust Board. I briefly share about Legacy Evening, about people standing in silence to honor a right decision, and I write the most important line: "Thank you for upholding a no nepotism principle in admissions. Haven Ridge can forgive, but its structure is not allowed to forget." I sign, stamp it, and set it by my wallet. I'll mail it in the morning. As night comes, I go to the garden. The rosemary I replanted behind the house has taken root, its cool green scent curling up when I run my hand against the leaves. I start slow steps along the edge of the grass, counting quietly. 1, 2, 3. At 10, I change direction. No calorie goals, no turning it into a workout schedule, just walking to notice my breath. Each time my foot touches ground, I feel my chest open a fraction more. Even breathing is the reward. In the past, breath was proof I was still alive. Today, it's a small joy. Then I stop on the porch and look toward the gate. Strangely, I no longer guard it, no longer listen for tires, guess at shadows, brace my heart for impact. The gate is still there, matte black paint, hinges that whisper when the wind moves it. But now, the gate guards me not with a lock, but with peace. It's like a gentle old watchman reminding me, slow down, choose who comes in, and remember you can sit too, without waiting for anyone. Late, I call Renee. We talk about the pottery class, about Joyce, about those wobbly bowls everyone loves. Come try tomorrow? Renee nudges. I laugh. I'll come tomorrow. I want to throw a little bowl with my own flaw. Then I tell her about the line carved on the stone bench. Renee says, someone probably carved it for herself first, then for others. I think, that's exactly right. At night, I turn on the small, warm kitchen light and write. I write less, because I don't need to record everything anymore. I write just enough to remember the smells, the light, the laughter. I write about the way a middle-aged woman in class put her hands on the clay like on a stray cat, slow, patient, holding back words. I write about the wind through the pines sounding like paper rustling, about a young couple walking by hand in hand, not knowing that a few yards away a woman is learning to begin again at 69. Before bed, I open the Writing About Me notebook again. I tape in a small scrap cut from a rosemary bag, the scent still faint. Under it, I write one line, "Here, I don't prove. I live." Then I close the notebook and set it on the shelf, where the moonlight touches one corner. Past midnight, a light wind rises. I hear the roof hum, the wood flexing like skin when the weather changes. I don't jump up to check the locks anymore. I know I locked them, and more than that, I've sealed the drafts inside me. Worries don't flood in like before, they knock. I recognize them, then let them go. The gate isn't something I cling to now. It's a quiet brace that reminds me with each passing day I'm a little closer to myself. The next morning I wake early, make a mild coffee, and sit on the steps looking at the lake under a thin veil of fog. I see an older woman pull a small cart past, pause to look into my garden, then smile and nod. I nod back. No words needed. In that small moment, I understand why Joyce insists on calling the class "Make Something Only Your Hands Can Make," because life is the same. No one can throw the pot that holds your peace for you. Others can give clay, water, and a wheel, but the touch has to be yours. In the afternoon, I pass the pottery studio. This time, I push the door open and walk in. The smell of wet clay and the faint trickle at the wash sink greet me. Joyce looks up and smiles. "Here to make your own flawed piece yet?" I answer. "Not sure where the flaw will land, but I'm here to find it." The others shift over and make room for me at a wheel. I roll up my sleeves, set the clay in the center, and press the pedal lightly. The wheel turns, the clay soft under my hands. I don't rush the shape. I just apply enough pressure, listening as my heartbeat falls into rhythm with the spin. Outside the window, the lake glints with a narrow silver streak, like a thread stitching afternoon to evening. At night, I set the table for one again, pour water into the glass, and tuck a lavender sprig in a vase. I look at the note on the fridge, "I am not an asset to be managed," and smile. Turns out, when your voice is back where it belongs, a solo, fate meal can feel as full as a feast. Turns out, when the gate no longer needs you to guard it, it guards you with quiet. So on days you're too tired, you still remember to open a window, let the wind touch your forehead, and say something very soft. That's enough for today, Loretta. Rest. Winter arrives as gently as breath. All of Cedar Lake wears a thin veil of snow, so pristine it seems it would melt at a touch. I brew cinnamon tea, the warm, sweet scent filling the room, and sit by the fireplace listening to the soft crackle like the house's steady heartbeat. Outside the window, the lake is starting to freeze in patches. A few small birds sit on bare branches, fluffing their feathers for warmth. I realize I'm no longer in a rush. No urgent emails, no budgets to review, no meetings I once thought would make the world collapse if I missed them. On the table is the Writing About Me notebook. I open to the last page, pick up my pen, and write the line that closes the story I've been living word by word for months. I'm not waiting for anyone to grant me permission anymore. It's a simple sentence, but each stroke is a year of fear. For years, I lived like a person waiting at a threshold, waiting to be loved, to be accepted, to be nodded through so I could be myself. Now I understand. No one can sign the form that lets you live fully except you. Every Tuesday, I still stop by Havenridge, but not as founder or owner. I go as a friend of the place, bringing cookies, sometimes just to sit in the library and read a few pages, or watch the women in pottery class laugh over the turning wheels. Once, Joyce asked, "Do you feel Havenridge is different now?" I nodded. Different in that it doesn't need me, and it still lives. That made me lighter than any success report I ever got. One afternoon, I get a call from Naomi. Her voice is firm but warm. "Loretta, the civil authority has opened an investigation into Colin and Tessa's financial dealings. We don't need to go to court, just wait for the result." I sit quiet for a moment, then say, "Thank you, Naomi. As for me, I'll let the law handle it." I don't hold grudges anymore. I just hope they learn the lesson I did, that possession is never love. That night, I sit by the window and write 3 letters by hand to Tessa, Jenna, and Colin. Plain paper, my handwriting a little shaky but steady. My children, I'm not asking for an apology, and I'm not blaming you. When you're ready to speak with respect, I'm here. Not to lecture, but to listen. I'm still your mother, but now I'm a mother who keeps her boundaries. I fold the 3 letters and seal them. I'm not sure they'll read them, but that's no longer the point. Some words need to be said so the heart has room to breathe, not to make someone answer. Night falls faster in snow season. I light a candle, put on instrumental music, and write a short passage in my notebook as if for a future reader, maybe a woman sitting in a quiet house where loneliness mingles with regret. If someone is reading this, remember, you have the right to set boundaries even with the people you love. That isn't selfish, it's how you keep your humanity from dissolving into someone else's. Real love doesn't need a deed of ownership. I set down the pen and close the notebook. The fireplace is still glowing, the fire reflecting a warm gold on the wall like skin. Outside, snow falls so slowly it feels like time is sitting here having tea with me. I look toward the lake and see my faint reflection under the thin mist, an ordinary woman with graying hair who no longer needs permission to be herself. I smile. This story, at last, belongs to me. Not a report, not evidence, not an argument. Just the story of someone who stopped trying to be loved the right way and started loving herself the right way. I set down my teacup and let the cinnamon mingle with the scent of burning wood. Winters are always cold at Cedar Lake, but I know something inside me is warming a fire that needs no kindling, only courage. I add one last line in my journal, like a message to myself and to anyone who's lived through collapse. Don't be afraid of losing someone. Be most afraid of losing yourself while trying to keep them. Then I close the notebook, lean back, and exhale slowly. Outside, the snow keeps falling, but inside me, the sky just broke into sun. Thank you truly for staying with me to these very last lines. If you're still here, maybe somewhere in this story you recognized a part of yourself, someone who once loved with everything, was hurt, and still chose to stand up with gentleness and self-respect. I want to ask you one thing. Where are you listening from? A small kitchen glowing warm, or a quiet room with only a lamp and your heartbeat? Wherever you are, I hope you know you are not alone. If any detail impressed us, when we of action relax my dawn, my journey made you pause, remember, or feel a small ache, please share one line in the comments. Who knows, your small story might be the light someone needs to walk through their own darkness. And if you want to keep going with me with the women, mothers, and fathers who have lost but refuse to fall, please hit follow or tap like. Every comment and every heart you leave is a warm beat that helps this story travel farther and touch more souls who need a hug made of words. I'm grateful to you, from the deepest place in me, for listening, for feeling, and for staying. Because sometimes just having one person stop with us in the long night is enough to believe we were never truly alone.